Greetings everyone, this is Omni-Wizard. Prepare yourselves for what if Batman landed to Hogwarts and chose Harry as his successor. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The man who fell from nowhere. The storm came in from the north without warning. One moment the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch was damp but flyable, the grey Scottish sky holding its breath the way it sometimes did in October, and the next the wind was screaming sideways, and Oliver Wood, had he still been at school, would have called the practice off immediately. But Oliver Wood had graduated, and Angelina Johnson had not yet learned that some weather wasn't worth fighting. "Keep formation," she shouted over the roar, her voice swallowed almost instantly by the gust. "Fred, George, stop messing about. Harry, stay high, watch the snitch." Harry Potter was already high. Too high, probably, given that he could barely see the pitch below him through the sheets of rain, but staying high kept him above the worst of the lateral wind and let him watch the whole pitch at once. His firebolt trembled in his grip, protesting the weather the way even the best brooms did when the sky stopped cooperating. He wasn't really watching for the snitch. He hadn't been watching for the snitch for the last 10 minutes. He'd been watching the clouds. There was something wrong with the clouds. It wasn't a magical kind of wrong. He'd grown used to that over 4 years at Hogwarts, the way the sky sometimes bent itself around Dumbledore's whims or shifted with the mood of the Forbidden Forest. This was a different kind of wrong. The clouds directly above the center of the pitch had developed a color that had no business existing in nature, a deep bruised violet black that sat separate from the surrounding storm like a bruise on skin, and they were rotating, not the lazy spiral of a forming tornado, but something tighter, something deliberate, like water draining from a bath. Harry, Ginny Weasley pulled up beside him on her clean sweep, squinting through the rain, her red hair plastered flat against her face. "Are you seeing that?" "Yeah, should we?" The sky split open. Not lightning. Harry had seen lightning, had flown through it once by accident in 3rd year, and lightning was a crack and a flash and gone. This was a tear, a vertical rip in the storm's underbelly, violet-white light bleeding through it like light through a wound, and something came through that rip at speed, trailing a sound that was less like thunder and more like the universe objecting. Whatever it was falling. "Move." Harry yanked his broom hard left. Ginny went right. The falling shape screamed between them close enough that Harry felt the displaced air slam his shoulder, and he spun in his hover, tracking it down toward the pitch. It hit the ground. Not crashed. Hit. There was a difference, though Harry couldn't have explained how he knew it. The person, because Harry could see now that it was a person, or shaped like one, hit the sodden grass of the center circle and absorbed the impact. One knee down, one fist down. The posture of something that had practiced landing from impossible heights so many times it had become instinct. The whole team was circling now, brooms at all altitudes, everyone frozen in that particular suspended moment before the brain catches up with the eyes. The figure stood up. It was tall, not freakishly so, but the kind of tall that wore itself well, all of it purposeful. It was wearing something that made Harry blink and blink again, because it made no sense in this context. Dark armor. Not chainmail, not anything medieval, advanced, sharp-edged, black as a closed mine, with a cowl that came to 2 points above the head, and a cape that the storm immediately seized and whipped out behind like a battle standard. Lenses where the eyes should be, white and expressionless in the rain. The chest plate bore the unmistakable outline of a bat. "What?" Fred Weasley said from somewhere above Harry, in the tone of a man who had given up on the sentence halfway through. The figure on the pitch looked up at the circling students on their brooms. It didn't move. It just looked, turning its head slowly and deliberately, taking in each of them with those blank white lenses, mapping something. Harry had the odd sensation that he was being photographed by someone who was also somehow simultaneously reading the footnotes. Then the great doors to the castle burst open 100 meters away, and Dumbledore walked out into the storm without an umbrella or a cloak, his purple robe simply refusing to get wet in a way that the rain itself seemed embarrassed about, and he walked toward the figure at a pace that was unhurried and completely deliberate. Harry descended without deciding to. The others followed him. None of them, it seemed, were prepared to miss whatever happened next. Up close, the armor was extraordinary in a way that had nothing to do with magic. Harry could see it as he hovered 20 feet back. Every surface was matte, designed to eat light rather than reflect it. The joints were engineered, not enchanted, moving with mechanical precision that would have impressed any of the Weasley twins at their most creative. There were things clipped to the belt and chest harness that Harry couldn't name, shapes that suggested purpose without advertising it, and the figure was still, preternaturally, deliberately still, not the stillness of fear. The stillness of someone who controlled exactly how much of themselves they revealed at any given moment, and had currently decided the answer was nothing. Dumbledore stopped 6 feet away. He regarded the armored figure the way he might regard an interesting chess problem, with something that was academic curiosity wearing the costume of concern. "Well," Dumbledore said pleasantly, as if they'd bumped into each other at a garden party, "this is unusual." The figure looked at him. The white lenses gave nothing away. "Your name," Dumbledore said, still pleasantly. It wasn't quite a question, a pause. The kind of pause that meant the person on the other end was deciding how much the truth cost them. "Wayne," the voice said. It was deep and deliberate, roughened at the edges in a way that suggested it was never fully unguarded. "Bruce Wayne." "Mr. Wayne," Dumbledore tilted his head. "You've arrived in rather dramatic fashion. Wasn't intentional." "No, I suspect not." Dumbledore glanced once briefly at the crater the landing had made in the pitch grass, roughly 6 inches deep, which was remarkable for a human being. "Are you injured?" Another pause. This one, Harry thought, was the pause of someone running a rapid internal diagnostic and deciding whether to be honest about the results. "Number, excellent. Shall we go inside?" Bruce Wayne looked at Dumbledore for a long moment. Then he looked past the headmaster at the ring of students on brooms, and his gaze settled on Harry in a way that was specific and brief, like a finger pointed and then withdrawn before anyone noticed. "Sure," he said. They took him to Dumbledore's office. Harry knew this because he was explicitly told he was not to follow, which meant he stood at the bottom of the moving staircase with Ron and Hermione and Ginny, and both Weasley twins for approximately 40 seconds before Hermione put her foot on the first step. "Hermione," Ron started. "Extendable ears," Fred said, producing a length of the flesh-colored product from his pocket with the cheerful resignation of someone who had simply accepted that their inventions would be used against their intended limitations. "We're already there, mate." Hermione wavered visibly between her instinct to obey and her rather more powerful instinct to know things, and her instinct to know things won in approximately 4 seconds. Harry was already on the stairs. They got the extendable ears threaded under the door just as Dumbledore was offering Bruce Wayne tea. "No," Bruce said. There was the sound of the armor settling as he sat, or didn't sit, Harry couldn't tell. "Tell me where I am." "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry," Dumbledore said. "In Scotland, in a version of Earth that may or may not be adjacent to your own. I find questions of dimensionality rather above my speciality, but the magic surrounding your arrival was consistent with what we call an uncontrolled Lazarus pit overflow, quite rare, rather spectacular when they occur." A very long pause. "You know what a Lazarus pit is," Bruce said. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a man filing information at speed. "I know many things," Dumbledore said serenely. I said number, so you did. Can I get back?" "That's a question I'd need to research. Days at minimum, possibly weeks. The rift that deposited you here sealed itself behind you, not uncommon with Lazarus overflow events. It will likely recur at a similar geomagnetic point, but predicting when? Weeks," Bruce repeated. "Possibly. I'm sorry, Mr. Wayne. I know that's not what you wanted to hear." Another pause. Harry pressed his ear closer to the extendable ear and felt Ron do the same from the other side. "What's the security situation here?" Bruce said. "Not what do you need or how can I help." Security situation. Like a general walking into a new theater of war, Dumbledore's response was amused and careful in equal measure. "That's a rather pointed first question. You have students here, children. Something brought me through a dimensional rift and dropped me in your Quidditch pitch. I want to know if that's a coincidence." "I believe it is," Dumbledore said. "In this case, and in general, what does your security situation look like in general?" A pause from Dumbledore this time, the kind that meant he was deciding how much the truth cost him. "We are at war," Dumbledore said quietly. "Or rather, we are in the very early stages of a war that most of the world has not yet admitted is happening. A dark wizard of considerable power has returned after a 14-year absence. He is currently gathering strength, building alliances, and undermining the institutions that might otherwise oppose him. Our government is in active denial. Our school is currently under the supervision of one of his indirect political allies, placed here by that government to, let us say, manage the information environment." Fred, outside the door, mouthed "manage the information environment" at George with an expression of profound appreciation. "How many students?" Bruce said. "Approximately 300. All of them targets. In a broad sense, yes. More specifically, one student in particular, though I'd prefer not to discuss the details of that tonight." "His name," Bruce said. Not asking, already knowing, Harry somehow sensed. "The Dark Wizard." "Voldemort," Dumbledore said. The word sat in the silence for a moment. I've read about him, Bruce said. The silence from Dumbledore's end went very still. I beg your pardon, before I came through. I was researching dimensional anomalies connected to Lazarus Pit geography. There's crossover data in some League of Shadows documentation I acquired 3 years ago. There were references. Wizarding world, Dark Lord, magical artifacts. I didn't have context for most of it, but I retained the information. Of course you did, Dumbledore said, and for the first time in Harry's 4.5 years of knowing the man, he sounded genuinely surprised. They were sent to bed at 10:30 by McGonagall, who appeared at the bottom of the stairs with the expression of someone who had known perfectly well what they were doing for the past 2 hours and had simply been deciding when to put a stop to it. Potter, Weasley, Granger, Weasley, Weasley, Weasley. She pointed down the corridor. Beds. Professor, Hermione said, in her most responsible voice, who is he? That is not your concern tonight. But beds, Miss Granger. Harry lay awake for 3 hours. He knew this because he watched the clock on his dormitory wall tick from 11 to midnight to 1 to 2, and by 2:30 he had established the following things with absolute certainty. That he was not going to sleep, that Ron's snoring was not helping, that Neville's description of the figure as some kind of muggle in a bat costume, which is actually quite culturally specific if you think about it, kept replaying in his head, and that the strange specific moment when those white lenses had looked at him on the pitch, that brief, deliberate focus, was refusing to be catalogued and filed away. He got up. He took the invisibility cloak from his trunk, hesitated, took the Marauder's map as well, and went. He didn't have a destination, which was how he ended up on the astronomy tower. The storm had exhausted itself sometime around midnight and left behind one of those devastatingly clear autumn nights that made the Scottish sky look like someone had spilled a jar of stars. Harry stood at the tower railing and felt the cold on his face and thought about nothing in particular, which was the closest he got these days to peace. You're sloppy with that cloak. Harry spun around. Bruce Wayne was sitting on the stone bench along the far wall, completely still, completely unlit, still in the armor minus the cowl which sat beside him like a discarded mask. Without it, the face was unexpectedly human, strong jaw, dark hair, a cut above one eyebrow that was still drying. His eyes were dark and very awake, doing the same thing they'd done on the pitch, photographing everything and giving nothing back. Harry pulled the cloak off. No point pretending now. How did you know I was here? Harry asked. Heard you on the 4th step up. You skipped the 2nd and 3rd, which squeaks, but the 4th has a longer creak that you stepped on the edge of. You've done it enough times that it's habit. He looked at Harry. Good habit, but not good enough. Harry blinked. You mapped the castle. I mapped the castle, Bruce confirmed. In 1 evening. I've done more in less time. He looked away, back toward the window and the stars. You're Harry Potter. You knew on the pitch. I suspected on the pitch. The scar confirmed it, though honestly the way everyone else on those brooms kept glancing at you would have been enough. Harry came and sat on the opposite end of the bench. He wasn't entirely sure why. He definitely should have gone back to bed. Dumbledore told you about me. He told me you were a specific target. He didn't give me your name. Bruce looked at him sideways. He didn't have to. Harry looked at the floor. There was something uncomfortable about being seen clearly and something else, something less comfortable than the discomfort that he couldn't name, a sort of tired relief. What are you really doing here? Harry asked. I told Dumbledore. Dimensional rift, Lazarus overflow. No, I mean, Harry tried to find the words. What are you doing here, on this tower? You could have been anywhere in the castle. Bruce was quiet for a moment. His hand rested on his knee and Harry noticed it then, the damage. The knuckles were scarred in the way that spoke of years, not accidents. The joints were subtly wrong at the edges, the cartilage worn in ways that it shouldn't be in a man who couldn't have been much over 35. Best vantage point, Bruce said. Full 360 view of the grounds, castle walls, the forest. Anyone approaching from any direction is visible at least 4 minutes before they arrive. You're watching for something. I'm always watching for something. He said it completely without drama, like stating that he breathed air. Where I come from, being unprepared is how people die. Harry thought about that. Gotham, he said. He'd been thinking about the name since the extendable ear conversation. Somewhere in the reaches of Hermione's obsessive background reading, she'd once mentioned a city in America famous for its crime rate. That's your city. That's my city. And you protect it. I try, a beat. Some nights better than others. The honesty of it was surprising. Harry had expected deflection or self-aggrandizement and gotten something that sounded almost like exhaustion wearing a coat of understatement. Dumbledore keeps things from people, Harry said, not entirely sure why he was saying it. He thinks he's protecting them. It makes me want to, I don't know. Sometimes I just want someone to tell me the actual truth. Bruce looked at him. The look went on for a moment longer than comfortable. Voldemort's going to make a move soon, Harry said. Something to do with a prophecy, something I overheard that I wasn't meant to. And Dumbledore knows and he's not. He won't look at me this year, not properly. Like I'm a problem he's solving in the background and I'm not supposed to know I'm the problem. You are the problem, Bruce said, or the solution, depending on how you look at it. Chosen one mythology usually means someone's already decided you're the answer before you've been told what the question is. Exactly. Harry's hands balled into fists on his knees. Exactly that. It's not kind, Bruce said. It's also not necessarily malicious. Dumbledore strikes me as someone who has learned to think in terms of outcomes rather than people. The outcome matters so much to him that the people inside it become means to an end. He probably thinks of it as caring. Do you? Harry looked at him. Think of it as caring. No, Bruce said. I think of it as a failure of imagination. Harry stared at him. He'd never heard anyone describe Albus Dumbledore as having a failure of anything. You can imagine better than your circumstances, Bruce said. Most people can't. Those who can have a responsibility to, not just toward their goals, but toward the people they bring into them. He paused. That's a personal failure of mine as much as I'm criticizing his. The honesty landed like something thrown. Harry caught it and held it. So what do? Harry asked. When you realize the situation you're in, when you're the problem. Bruce Wayne looked at him across the bench and something shifted slightly in his expression, not softening exactly but recognizing, like looking in a mirror that showed a different face but the same eyes. You prepare, Bruce said, better than anyone expects you to. Harder than anyone asks you to. You make yourself into something that the problem can't solve, and then you walk directly at it. That's your advice, walk directly at it. That's my life. Bruce picked up the cowl, turned it over in his hands. But walking directly at it has to mean something more than just walking. Anyone can walk into a fight, walking into it prepared, walking into it strategic, walking into it knowing you've done everything. That's different. You think I'm not prepared. I watched you fly tonight. You're talented, athletic, your instincts are good. He set the cowl down. You're also reactive. You respond to situations as they develop. You don't create situations that work in your favor. Harry opened his mouth. That's not an insult, Bruce said. That's an assessment, and there's a difference. Harry closed his mouth. The stars turned overhead. Somewhere deep in the forbidden forest, an owl called twice and went silent. The thing on your forehead, Bruce said. The scar, it connects you to him. Harry went still. How do you know that? I don't. I'm deducing it from the way Dumbledore talked around it, the way you're sitting right now, and the way you touched it twice during this conversation without realizing you did. Harry took his hand away from his forehead. Does it hurt? Bruce asked. Not in the way people usually asked, the careful, pitying way, the way that felt like being handled. He asked it the way a diagnostician asked about a symptom. Sometimes, Harry said, when he's feeling something. When he's angry, I get these flashes, images, feelings that aren't mine. You should be able to use that. Dumbledore says I should close it off, learn occlumency. Dumbledore, Bruce said, is correct that you shouldn't be broadcasting your own mental state into his. The fact that the connection goes both ways is a tactical asset that shouldn't be wasted on passive defense. He looked at the scar. A door can be locked or it can be controlled. Those aren't the same thing. Harry stared at him. He had been told approximately once a week since September that he needed to close the door. Nobody had ever suggested that the door might be worth something. Who are you? Harry asked. I mean, I know what you said. I know you're Bruce Wayne. But who are you? Bruce was quiet for a long moment. My parents were murdered, he said. When I was 8 years old, in front of me, an alley, a man with a gun. The words came out measured and without inflection, which made them land harder than any display of grief would have. I spent the next decade deciding what to do about it. The answer I arrived at was that I would make myself into something that fear could not defeat. That injustice could not ignore. That the kind of man who killed my parents in that alley would look at and would stop. The silence after that was very complete. And did it work? Harry asked. On nights when it doesn't, Bruce said, I keep working. He looked at Harry. You lost your parents too. I was a year old, I don't remember it. That might be harder, Bruce said. You carry the loss without the memory. There's nothing to hold on to, just the shape of the absence. Harry's throat tightened in a way he didn't expect and hadn't braced for. He looked away, out at the forest, because the back of his eyes was doing something he was absolutely not going to let happen. Yeah, he said very quietly, something like that. Bruce didn't offer comfort. He didn't fill the silence with noise. He just sat there and let Harry be a person having a feeling, which was, Harry realized, swallowing hard, exactly the right thing to do. After a minute, Harry said, You looked at me on the pitch when you landed. I did. Why me specifically? Because, Bruce said, you were the only one who came down. Harry frowned. What? When I landed, every student on those brooms stayed up, self-preservation, sensible enough, hovered and watched, except one. You descended immediately, no hesitation. No consultation with your teammates, just, he made a downward movement with one hand, straight toward the unknown thing on the ground. He looked at Harry. You weren't being reckless. You were being curious, there's a difference. Reckless doesn't look where it's going, you were completely focused. I could have been reckless, Harry said. I've been accused of it. By people who think recklessness and courage look the same, Bruce said. They don't. One moves toward danger without engaging its brain. The other moves toward danger because it's engaged its brain and decided the risk is worth accepting. He held Harry's gaze. You decided the risk was worth accepting. Harry didn't say anything. He wasn't sure what to say. I look for someone, Bruce said, and the quality of his voice changed slightly, like a frequency shift rather than a volume shift. When I consider training someone, bringing someone into what I do, I look for that. The person who comes down. Harry's heart kicked against his ribs. I'm talking about a hypothetical, Bruce said, but the word hypothetical sat awkwardly in the sentence, like a coat worn by someone it didn't fit. I have no idea how long I'm here. I have no standing in this school or this world. I have no right to walk in and start rearranging things. But, Harry said, a long pause. But Bruce said, you're being prepared badly for a fight you can't afford to lose. And I find that, he stopped. The armor shifted as he breathed. Unacceptable, he finished. I find it unacceptable. The word had heat in it, not fury, just that specific, immovable kind of conviction that had no interest in being argued with. Dumbledore won't let you, Harry said. He won't let anyone near me that he hasn't already. I'll talk to Dumbledore in the morning. He doesn't just agree to things. Neither do I, Bruce said. Something in his voice made Harry suddenly, completely certain that the conversation with Dumbledore was going to be genuinely interesting to be near, and something else, something more complicated, made him feel something he hadn't felt since Sirius had first written to him, or since the mirror where his parents waved from the other side. Not a small feeling, not something he could name quickly, something that felt uncomfortably like hope with teeth. You should sleep, Bruce said. Your mind is running circles, so's yours. I don't sleep much. He said it like a fact about the weather. And you have, what is it, potions at 8, Snape, how do you know my schedule? Talk to a portrait on the second floor. He almost smiled. The corner of his mouth moved in a way that might qualify in very forgiving light. They're remarkably forthcoming once you explain you're not a student. Harry laughed before he could stop it. It surprised him, the sound of it, too genuine, too sudden. He pressed his hand over his mouth, and Bruce looked at him with that expression again, the one that was recognition wearing the clothes of observation. Go, Bruce said. You'll need your head clear tomorrow. Harry stood up, picked up the invisibility cloak. He stopped at the top of the stairs. Mr. Wayne, Bruce looked at him. For what it's worth, Harry said, I'm glad the rift landed you here. Wherever it was trying to put you, I mean. He paused. I'm glad it was here. Bruce held his gaze for a moment. Get some sleep, Potter. Harry went down the stairs, stepping over the 4th step by habit. From the astronomy tower above, Bruce Wayne watched the darkness beyond the castle walls and did not move for a very long time. He had a meeting to prepare for. Dumbledore was already at his desk when Bruce entered the office at 7:15 the next morning. The headmaster looked up over his half-moon spectacles with the expression of a man who had been expecting this and had still not entirely decided how he felt about it. You didn't sleep, Dumbledore observed. I mapped your castle, Bruce said, sitting down without being invited. You have 14 structural vulnerabilities in your outer perimeter. 3 of your 4 main entrances can be bypassed without triggering any detection magic if you approach from within a 60-degree arc on the north face. Your forest is a security problem you're treating as a constant rather than a variable. And your current internal administrator, he said the 2 words with the specific care of someone choosing not to say the actual thing they thought, is a more immediate threat to the students in this building than you appear to be treating her. Dumbledore set down his quill. The portraits on the walls shuffled with interest. You've been busy, Dumbledore said. I want to train Harry Potter, Bruce said. I see. Not because I think I'm better suited than you. You clearly do think that, Dumbledore said pleasantly. I think, Bruce said, that you are preparing him to survive a destiny. I want to prepare him to reject one. Those require different approaches. He met Dumbledore's eyes. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black muttered something and was ignored by everyone. You've built a chessboard, headmaster. You've positioned all your pieces. Harry's the one piece you keep in reserve because losing him loses the game, which means he never learns the game. He reacts. He survives on instinct and luck and the love of his friends. He paused. Those are real and they matter. They're not enough. And you believe you can offer what I cannot, Dumbledore said. I believe I can offer what you won't, Bruce said. Because giving him everything he needs means telling him everything, and you've decided he doesn't need to know. The fire crackled. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time with those blue eyes that were simultaneously ancient and somehow still surprised by the world. You spoke with him last night, Dumbledore said. You knew he was up there. I know most things that happen in this castle, Dumbledore said. A pause. He sought you out, not the other way around. He did, and in your conversation. Nothing you wouldn't already know, Bruce said. I didn't tell him anything you haven't implied. I just let him think out loud without managing him. He held the headmaster's gaze. He's starving for it, for someone who'll treat him like a person rather than a prophecy. Dumbledore was very still. I have reasons, he said quietly, for the distance between us this year. I'm sure they're good reasons, Bruce said. I'm equally sure they're costing him more than you've calculated. The silence stretched. A sorting hat on a shelf that Harry had only ever seen inert shifted slightly, as if listening. What do you want, specifically? Dumbledore said at last. Access to Harry for training, daily if possible. Unrestricted, meaning I decide the curriculum and I don't run it past you first. He paused. In exchange, I'll operate within your structures. I'll respect the school rules. I won't move against Umbridge publicly without informing you first. He met Dumbledore's eyes. I said informing, not asking permission. A fine distinction, an important one. Dumbledore looked at him for a very long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and did something that Bruce hadn't expected. He smiled. Not the benevolent, managed smile Bruce had seen the night before, but something smaller and more real, something that looked like genuine appreciation for a specific kind of adversary. Very well, Mr. Wayne, Dumbledore said. I believe we have an arrangement. Bruce stood. He moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. One more thing, he said, without turning around. When you're ready to tell him about the Horcruxes, he felt the absolute stillness behind him without seeing it. Tell him yourself, before he finds out another way. He walked out. Behind him, in the office, the silence went on for quite a long time. In Gryffindor Tower, Harry Potter was sitting at breakfast with Ron and Hermione, who were arguing about whether Bruce Wayne was a government operative, a squib bounty hunter, or, in Fred's creative contribution, some sort of American Dark Lord who's just decided to do it differently. Harry ate his toast and said nothing. He was thinking about a man on a tower who had looked at him and seen him, not the scar, not the prophecy, not the boy who lived, but him, and had called what he saw worth something. He was thinking about what it meant to be the person who comes down. He finished his toast. He had potions at 8. Chapter 2. The Mirror and the Mask. Snape had a particular talent for making Monday mornings feel like a personal sentence. Harry sat in the dungeon classroom, with the familiar cold seeping up through the stone floor, and watched Snape glide between the cauldrons with that expression he wore, the one that wasn't quite contempt and wasn't quite boredom, but lived somewhere in the neighborhood of both, feeding off the warmth of other people's discomfort. The lesson was on strengthening solutions, which should have been interesting and under Snape's instruction became the academic equivalent of being slowly lowered into tepid water. Potter. Snape stopped beside his cauldron without looking at it, his eyes on Harry's face. The bicorn horn goes in after the second reduction, not during. If you're incapable of reading the instructions on the board, I suggest you find a career that doesn't require literacy. Ron's jaw tightened from across the table. Harry looked back at the board, added the bicorn horn after the second reduction, and said nothing. This was new. 6 weeks ago he would have said something, not smart, just something, some instinctive spark of resistance, because Snape pushed and Harry pushed back, and the result was always more detentions and the same amount of satisfaction on both sides. Today he looked at the board, measured the horn, and thought instead about what Bruce had said on the tower. You're reactive. You respond to situations as they develop. You don't create situations that work in your favor. He thought about Snape, about what a situation that worked in his favor might look like in a dungeon classroom on a Monday morning. He thought about it for the rest of the lesson and produced the best strengthening solution he'd made since second year. Snape graded it without comment, which from Snape was practically a standing ovation. You were quiet in there, Hermione said, catching up with him in the corridor afterward, her cauldron tucked under her arm, her brow doing that thing it did when she was solving a problem she hadn't yet named. Was I? You didn't react when he said the thing about literacy. Number. You always react to the literacy thing. I know. Harry adjusted his bag. I'm trying something. Hermione looked at him sidelong. She had the specific expression of someone who had more questions than she was certain she had the right to ask yet, which for Hermione was an extremely unusual expression. This is about last night, isn't it? About Wayne. Probably. Harry, she stopped walking. He stopped too, because when Hermione stopped walking with intent, you ignored it at your peril. We don't know anything about him. He fell out of the sky in armor. That's not a normal starting point for trusting someone. I don't trust him, Harry said. I just think he might be right about some things. Which things? Harry looked at her. The part where I keep reacting instead of thinking. Hermione opened her mouth, reconsidered, and closed it. This was rarer than the stopped walking. That's fair, she said finally, which Harry suspected cost her something. That's actually fair. They walked to Transfiguration. The note arrived at lunch, slipped under his plate by what appeared to be no one, which meant it was almost certainly a house elf, and almost certainly from someone who understood the infrastructure of Hogwarts in specific and unusual detail. Room of requirement, 4 p.m. Come alone or bring the ones you trust, your choice. BW. Harry showed it to Ron and Hermione. Ron read it twice and then looked up with an expression of absolute, uncomplicated decision. We're going, he said, in the tone of a man for whom the alternative was not an option worth entertaining. Hermione folded it carefully. We're going, she confirmed, in the tone of a woman who had already thought of 17 reasons not to and overruled all of them. They went. The room of requirement had become, over the course of the last month, the DA's training space, its usual configuration of cushioned floor, practice dummies, and disarming-friendly open space. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione arrived at 4, they found it had changed. The cushions were gone, the dummies were gone. The open space remained, but the edges of the room had become something else. There were weights that Harry didn't recognize, bars at varying heights bolted to one wall, lengths of rope, and a frame of wooden beams assembled with engineering precision in the far corner. The floor was bare stone except for a central mat, and it was large. Bruce Wayne stood in the center of the mat in clothes that were still uncompromisingly dark, but were not the armor, training clothes, Harry supposed, dark trousers, and a long-sleeved shirt that showed the actual architecture of the man more clearly than the suit had. He was broad across the shoulders in the functional, earned way, not the decorative way, and there were scars visible on his forearms where the sleeves were pushed up, a topography of old violence that told a story without narrating it. He was not alone. Dumbledore had apparently sent word, because Remus Lupin was there, looking tired in his permanent way, his robes shabby, his eyes sharp, and Tonks, who Harry hadn't known was anywhere near Hogwarts, was perched on one of the wooden beams eating an apple, and had changed her hair to bright orange since the last time Harry had seen her, which felt like the right amount of Tonks. You brought them, Bruce said when Harry walked in, glancing at Ron and Hermione. He said it was my choice, Harry said. It was. Bruce looked at Ron and Hermione with the same quiet assessment he applied to everything. You trust them. Completely, Harry said. Good, then stop wasting it by not using them properly. He moved to the edge of the mat. Sit down, all of you. They sat. Lupin took a chair at the edge of the room with the posture of a man who had been asked to observe, and intended to do exactly that, no more, no less. Tonks hopped off the beam, finished her apple in one enthusiastic bite, and sat cross-legged on the floor with the air of someone who expected to enjoy themselves. I'm not starting with spells, Bruce said. I'm not starting with physical training. I'm starting with something harder than both. What's harder than both? Ron asked. Thinking clearly when everything in your body wants to do something stupid, Bruce said, which is most situations. Sit with that for a second. Ron sat with it. He nodded slowly. Yeah, all right. Here's what I've established about you three since yesterday, Bruce said. He wasn't reading from notes. Potter, instinctive fighter, physical courage bordering on compulsive, strong magical power with significant gaps in its application. Tendency to make correct decisions for emotional reasons, which means when the emotional trigger is removed you struggle to make the same decision rationally. He looked at Harry. You're brave because it feels right, not because you've reasoned through it. That works until it doesn't. Harry held his gaze. It was uncomfortable in the way that accurate things often were. Granger, exceptional technical knowledge, deep magical foundation, analytical mind that occasionally becomes an obstacle, because you need to understand something before you trust it. You follow rules not because you're incapable of breaking them, but because structure is how you manage a world that would otherwise feel very large and unpredictable. He looked at Hermione. That's a strength. Right now it's also a leash. Hermione's jaw was tight. She nodded once sharply, like she was angry at him for being correct. Weasley, Bruce looked at Ron. You underestimate yourself so consistently that it's almost a strategy. Strong situational awareness, excellent instincts under pressure, more tactical intelligence than you've been credited for or credit yourself with. Your primary obstacle is that you've spent years in supporting roles and you've started to mistake support for limitation. Ron stared at him. Several expressions crossed his face in rapid succession. He landed on something that was almost aggressive surprise. How do you know any of that? You've known us for 12 hours. I watched you at breakfast, Bruce said, and dinner, and the corridor after potions, which I wasn't following you for specifically. I was studying Umbridge's patrol routes. He looked at Ron. You let Granger finish 3 sentences that you started. You offered your dessert to Potter without him asking. You clocked the Slytherin group in the corner before anyone else at the table did, and then said nothing because no one else looked concerned. He paused. You see things, you just don't think they're worth saying. Ron looked at Hermione. Hermione looked at Ron. Something passed between them that Harry caught the edge of and filed for later. All right, Ron said quietly. All right, I hear you. Good, Bruce said, because you're all going to need to hear a lot of things that are uncomfortable. And the ability to hear them without shutting down is actually the first skill we're building. He looked at all 3 of them. The ego is the first thing a real enemy targets. In a fight, in a political situation, in an interrogation, if you react to what they say about you, you've already lost a degree of control, so we're going to practice that. How? Harry asked. By having Lupin and Tonks tell you the worst things they honestly think about your abilities, Bruce said, and your job is to listen without reacting, not suppress, analyze. Ask yourself whether it's true. Ask yourself what you do with it if it is. Don't perform calm, actually find it. Lupin shifted in his chair. He looked at Bruce with an expression that was professionally neutral and slightly pained. You've discussed this with me, he said. I've asked you to be honest, Bruce said, which is different from having discussed it. He looked at Tonks. Tonks had dropped the cheerful affect. She was looking at Harry with something that was genuinely fond and genuinely serious at once. We doing this, please, Harry said. Tonks looked at him for a moment. You project, she said. When you're angry, everyone in the room knows it before you open your mouth. In a covert situation, that gets people killed, not metaphorically. Actually, Harry absorbed this. He thought about Snape's class this morning. He thought about every time Umbridge had smiled at him, and he'd felt the fury rise hot and immediate and had to clench his jaw against it. True, he said. Keep going. Tonks blinked. She'd expected pushback. And you have a hero complex that sometimes reads as self-destructive. You'll throw yourself at a problem to protect someone else before you've asked if there's a better option that protects you both. Also true, Harry said. Lupin cleared his throat and looked at Harry with genuine difficulty. You are prone to trusting emotionally before you trust analytically. It's one of your most wonderful qualities. It's also the vulnerability that Voldemort will exploit if he hasn't already. The name fell in the room without flinching, because in this room, for these people, flinching at it had been abandoned as an option. He's already tried, Harry said. He looked at Lupin, the thing with Sirius, 2nd year, the diary. He'll try again, Lupin said quietly. He'll find the person or the idea that makes you move before you think. And it'll work, Harry, it'll work because you love people, and that's not, I want to be very clear, that is not a flaw, but it is a vector. Harry was very quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I know that, he stopped, looked at his hands. I don't know how to protect the people I love and also think at the same time. It's like, he looked up at Bruce. When someone I care about is in danger, the thinking part just stops. I know, Bruce said. It was the first personal thing he'd said in the session, and it landed differently because of that. I know exactly what that's like. He sat down on the mat across from Harry, cross-legged, which somehow made him seem both more human and more formidable. And the answer isn't to care less. The answer is to have done so much thinking before the moment that your body can act correctly while your feelings are happening simultaneously. You prepare the response in advance. You run the scenarios. You know what you'll do in enough variations that when the real one arrives, there's a framework already in place. That sounds exhausting, Hermione said. It is, Bruce said, without apology. It is completely exhausting. Welcome to being someone who carries other people's safety. The room went quiet with the weight of that. All right, Harry said, show me where to start. They started with falls. This was not what Harry had expected. He'd expected spells or some form of combat, or at absolute minimum a dramatic speech. Instead, Bruce stood him in the center of the mat and had Tonks, whose abilities as a metamorph magus made her the ideal training partner for physical unpredictability, grab Harry without warning from multiple angles, while Harry's job was solely to get his hands and feet under him before he hit the ground. He failed 11 times consecutively. Not spectacular failures, just the ordinary failure of someone whose body had never been trained to manage momentum, which meant every time Tonks grabbed him he went down in whatever direction physics decided was convenient, which on a stone floor in any real situation would mean a concussion at minimum. Again, Bruce said, each time, with no variation in tone that Harry could detect. On the 12th attempt, Harry managed to get 1 foot down. On the 15th, he got 2 feet down briefly before his ankle rolled. On the 20th, he landed controlled, balanced, immediately oriented. "There," Bruce said. "That." Harry was breathing hard. He looked at Bruce. "That's it, that's the lesson." "That's 1/20th of the first hour," Bruce said. "How did it feel, the 20th time versus the first?" Harry thought about it honestly. "Different, not because I was thinking about it differently. More like the right thing was already happening before I decided to make it happen." "Muscle memory," Bruce said. "The body learns faster than the conscious mind and retains longer. We're going to spend the next 3 weeks building motor patterns so that when you're under genuine threat, your body can handle the physical dimension while your mind handles the tactical one. Right now they're competing. We're going to make them cooperate." 3 weeks of falling down?" Ron asked. He was sitting against the wall, and Harry noticed his expression, not mocking, not bored, taking notes. Ron was watching the falling drills like he was memorizing a pattern. 3 weeks of this in the next layer and the layer after," Bruce said. "By the end of 3 weeks, you'll be a different person in a physical confrontation than you are right now." He looked at Ron. "You're analyzing my footwork." Ron looked slightly caught. Yeah, I keep thinking about it like chess." "It is like chess," Bruce said immediately, and the look on Ron's face when he said it, the sudden startled brightness of being confirmed, was one Harry was going to remember. Every movement creates a position. Every position has options and vulnerabilities. If you can read the board correctly, you can see 3 moves ahead. "What were you seeing?" Ron sat up slightly. "When you move her," he nodded at Tonks. "You always give her a fraction of a second more weight on her right foot before you shift her. It's tiny, but it means her response will come from the left." Tonks looked at Ron with genuine appreciation. "He's right," she said. "He is right," Bruce said. "I know it. I've been doing it deliberately to see who in this room would clock it." He held Ron's gaze. "You did, in under 20 minutes. He turned back to Harry. Again. An hour later, sweaty and with 2 new bruises on his shoulder, Harry sat on the mat with Ron while Hermione and Bruce walked the perimeter of the room, and Harry listened to what they were talking about. "The castle's magical architecture," Bruce was saying, and Hermione was keeping up without strain, "operates on a need-based response system, the room of requirement being the obvious example, but it extends throughout the structure. I want to understand the failure states. Not how the magic works when it works correctly, how it fails." "That's," Hermione started, then visibly caught herself starting to say that's not how people usually study it. "That's actually an interesting angle. The magic fails predictably in areas of high emotional trauma. There are historical cases, after the First War, where certain rooms in the castle stopped responding entirely for years." "What does that tell you about Voldemort's likely attack vectors?" Bruce asked. A pause. "That he'd induce emotional trauma to weaken the castle's active defenses," Hermione said slowly. "He'd target the feeling of the place rather than the physical structure." She stared at the floor. I never thought about it that way. That's terrifying." "It's information," Bruce said. "Terrifying and useful aren't mutually exclusive." Ron leaned toward Harry. "She's completely in love with talking to him," he murmured. "She's completely in love with someone who treats her like she's the smartest person in the room," Harry murmured back. "Yeah," Ron said. "Imagine," he paused. "Same actually, I mean not the same, but I know what you mean," Harry said. They sat quietly for a moment. "Do you actually trust him?" Ron asked, not confrontationally. Genuinely, Harry thought about the astronomy tower. About the specific quality of the silence when Bruce had let him feel what he felt without managing it. About the look that was recognition. "I think he's the most honest person I've ever met," Harry said. "Even when he's not telling me everything. Whatever he does say, he means it completely." Ron chewed on this. "Right, yeah." He looked at Bruce and Hermione. "I think he's going to break something," he said. "In a good way, something that needs breaking." "Yeah," Harry said. "I think so too." At the end of the session, when Lupin and Tonks had gone and Hermione and Ron were gathering their things, Bruce stopped Harry with a hand on his shoulder. "Walk with me," he said. They left the room of requirement and walked in the direction of the astronomy tower without discussing it, because that was apparently where they both went when thinking mattered. The corridors were quiet, dinner was happening in the Great Hall, and the population of Hogwarts was largely concentrated there. "The occlumency lessons," Bruce said. "With Snape." Harry's stomach did a thing. "Dumbledore told you about that. He mentioned them. I'm asking you about them. There, he attacks my mind, basically, without warning. The idea is that I learn to block it." Harry pushed his glasses up. "It's going badly, because it's framed as defense," Bruce said. "And defense requires a position of strength to execute. You walk into that room already anticipating humiliation. Snape's methods aren't designed to build anything. They're designed to break in and catalog what they find, so your mind is braced to receive damage rather than positioned to prevent entry. He was quiet for a moment. What does it feel like when he breaks through? Harry considered. Like I lose the edges of myself, like I can't find where I stop and the memory starts. It all sort of floods. You need anchors, Bruce said. Something that is entirely and only yours. A thought, a feeling, a specific sensory memory, something so distinctly you that an external mind making contact with it is immediately identifiable as foreign. He paused. In my training, my teacher called them foundations. The things you know are true about yourself with absolute certainty regardless of what someone else's perception might say. What are yours? Harry asked. A pause. The question had surprised him. Harry could see that, not destabilized him, just momentarily stepped on a threshold he hadn't expected. I will not stop, Bruce said. Whatever happens, whatever I lose. I don't stop, he said it the way you say something you have tested to destruction and found indestructible. That's mine, completely mine. Harry walked for a few paces. I protect people, he said. Not I'm supposed to or I try to, just I protect people. He felt the truth of it as he said it, the way it fit. That's mine, whatever else is happening, that's what I am. Bruce looked at him. Then when Snape comes in, that's the room you stand in, not the memories on the surface. Not the things he'll inevitably find and use. You stand in that room and let him find only the thing that is absolutely, completely you. He paused, and you practice getting back to it faster each time. Until it takes a fraction of a second. Until no one can take you far enough from yourself that you can't find the way back. Harry stopped walking. They were outside, he realized. They'd come through a side door without Harry noticing and they were in the courtyard and it was cold and the stars were just beginning to show. You're teaching me, Harry said. Not just training, actually teaching. Is that a problem? Number, Harry looked at him. No, it's the opposite of a problem. He paused. I just want to be clear that I understand what this is, what you're doing, because last time someone took an interest in me like this, specifically in me, it was Dumbledore, and he stopped. And you're wondering if I have an endgame, Bruce said. Do you? Bruce looked at the stars for a moment. My endgame is that you survive this war, not as someone else's weapon, not as a fulfillment of a prophecy. As yourself, fully capable, fully informed, fully chosen, you wake up on the day it ends and you know you made every decision with your eyes open. He looked at Harry. If that helps you, good. If it serves some broader strategic purpose in a dimensional conflict I'm only partially understanding, also good. Both of those things can be true. That's honest, Harry said. I told you, I don't have the energy for anything else. Harry almost smiled. It was a close thing, and the almost was because something else was sitting underneath it, something weighty and warm and a little frightening. When you go back, Harry said, when the rift opens and you go back to Gotham, what happens to, he stopped, reorganized. Will any of this continue? I don't know, Bruce said, but you'll have trained me enough by then. That's the plan. And if the rift takes longer than expected, if you're here for months rather than weeks, Bruce was quiet for a moment. Then we have more time, and more time means more layers. He looked at Harry. Why? Because I want to make it matter, Harry said, however long it is. I want to make it count for something, not just for me, for everyone. He looked at the castle. Umbridge is getting worse. She started intercepting mail, I think. Hedwig's been delayed twice and she always knows where she's going. And whatever she's planning to do with her educational decrees, it's heading somewhere specific. I know, Bruce said. I've been watching her. She won't be manageable much longer. She'll come for the DA. She'll come for anyone who Dumbledore's given any kind of access to, which means she'll come for you. He looked at Bruce. And I think part of me wants to be ready for that, wants to not be the person who just reacts when it happens. Bruce looked at him with that expression again, the one that was recognition. Yeah, he said, now you're thinking. It was the third session, 2 days later, Thursday afternoon, when things shifted. Harry had expected another physical drill. He'd been wrong. He arrived at the room of requirement to find no mat, no equipment, nothing but 2 chairs facing each other and Bruce sitting in one of them. Sit down, Bruce said. Harry sat. He looked at the room. No training today. This is training. Bruce leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees. I need you to walk me through every significant magical encounter you've had since you were 11 years old. Every fight, every confrontation. Not the narrative, not what you felt or what it meant. What actually happened in sequence with as much physical detail as you can recall. What spells were used, what worked, what failed, what the environment was, what you knew and didn't know going in. Harry stared at him. That's all of them, all of them. That's going to take hours, Bruce said. Probably 2 sessions. I'm not in a hurry. Harry sat back. He thought about the Philosopher's Stone chamber, and the basilisk, and the dementors, and the graveyard, especially the graveyard, because the graveyard was the thing that showed up when he wasn't ready for it, in the quiet moments, with Cedric's face and the sound of his parents' voices, and he thought about what it meant to lay all of that out on a table and let someone look at it without sentiment. "You're going to find my weaknesses," Harry said. "I'm going to find your patterns," Bruce said. "You already know your weaknesses. What you don't know is how your previous encounters have shaped the way you approach new ones without you realizing it. The thing that almost killed you in the graveyard, the connection with his wand, you survived it through a form of magic neither of you fully understood. That means you almost died because of a factor you couldn't have anticipated. I want to find all the other factors like that one and anticipate them now before the next encounter." Harry was quiet. "Then, why do you care so much about the graveyard specifically?" "Because it's the template," Bruce said. "Whatever Voldemort plans next will build on what he learned there. His strengths, his failures, his estimation of you. You survived something he expected to be fatal, which means his next move will be designed around the version of you he knows, not the version we're building." He held Harry's gaze. "That's our advantage. We know he'll underestimate what you've become. We know the shape of his assumptions. We use that." Harry thought about Voldemort's voice in the graveyard, cold and curious and certain. "Kill the spare." He thought about the way Voldemort had talked about him, to his Death Eaters, not with hatred, but with a sort of clinical impatience, like Harry was an irritating variable in an otherwise clean equation. "He thinks of me as a problem," Harry said. "A loose end that history keeps refusing to tie off. And you are going to become the single most inconvenient loose end in the history of this war," Bruce said, "on purpose." Something settled in Harry's chest, something that had been restless and circling for weeks, months, honestly, since the end of last year, found a direction and stopped moving in circles. "All right," Harry said. "Philosopher's Stone, first year, June." Bruce leaned back and folded his hands and listened. He listened for 3 hours without interrupting, without shifting, without showing anything except the occasional slight movement in his expression that Harry learned to read over the course of that afternoon. A fractional stillness when something surprised him. A very slight lean forward when something was strategically significant, and once, during Harry's account of the graveyard and the priori incantatem connection. A look that moved across his face quickly and was gone before Harry could fully name it, but that he was fairly certain was grief. Not pity, grief, the specific grief of someone who recognized a particular kind of impossible situation from the inside. When Harry finished 6th year, he'd started at the beginning of term and worked forward, ending at the present. Bruce was quiet for a long moment. "He touched you," Bruce said. "In the graveyard, deliberately, took your blood." "Yes, because the old protection, your mother's sacrifice, the way Dumbledore anchored it to your aunt's house, was a barrier to him. He wanted to eliminate it. That's what Dumbledore told me, yes. But here's what Dumbledore didn't say, and I want you to think about this carefully." Bruce looked at him. "If your blood runs in Voldemort's veins, then your mother's protection runs in Voldemort's veins. The thing that has been Voldemort's greatest obstacle is now a part of his body." He paused. "That is not a vulnerability that was eliminated in that graveyard. That is a vulnerability that was relocated, to him." The silence that followed was the kind that happens when something reorders itself. "I don't," Harry stopped. "I don't understand what that means, tactically." "I don't fully understand it either," Bruce said. "Yet, but I'm going to. And when I do," he looked at Harry with that specific quality of intention that Harry had already learned, meant the decision was already made. The question was only the mechanics. "You're going to be ready to use it." Harry sat with this for a long moment, the way you sit with something that changes the shape of a room without moving the walls. "You see things differently than everyone else," Harry said. "The way you look at things that everyone else treats as finished and find the thing that's still moving." "It's a habit," Bruce said. "A very old one. Can it be learned?" "You're already doing it," Bruce said. "The question you just asked, what does this mean tactically?" 6 weeks ago, you wouldn't have asked that question. You would have sat with the weight of what it meant emotionally and not moved past it. He looked at Harry. "You moved past it in about 4 seconds. Harry blinked. He thought back. He'd felt the weight, the staggering, almost physical weight of what that protection might mean, what his mother had done extending further than anyone had calculated, and then he'd moved. Straight to what do we do with this? "Huh," he said. "Yeah," Bruce said, almost dry. Harry laughed, just once. The room felt different than it had when he walked in, lighter in some places and heavier in others, but different in the way that forward motion always felt different from standing still. "Same time Monday?" Harry asked. "Bring Weasley and Granger Monday," Bruce said. "What we discussed today changes the DA's approach and they need to hear it." Harry stood up. He was almost to the door when Bruce said, without looking up from where he was studying something on his belt, "You did well today, not with the information. The information was just information. You did well with what it cost you to say it." Harry stopped. The graveyard, Cedric, his parents' voices, all of it laid out on a table and looked at as data rather than as wound. "It did cost something," Harry said. "I know," Bruce said. "It should. The day it doesn't is the day you've stopped being human. Don't let that happen." He said it with the particular intensity of a man who knew firsthand what that day looked like and was warning someone he cared about to stay on the right side of it. Harry went out into the corridor. He stood in the corridor for a moment, hand on the stone wall. Then he went to find Ron and Hermione and tell them to clear their Monday. Across the castle, in the pink-saturated office that smelled of rose perfume and quiet authority, Dolores Umbridge set down her teacup and looked at the memo in her hand. Bruce Wayne, American, no recorded magical ability, no ministry clearance, present at Hogwarts grounds by apparent invitation of Headmaster Dumbledore. Purpose unspecified. She read it twice. She smiled slowly, the way a cat smiles at something it hasn't caught yet but is fairly certain will not be difficult to catch. She picked up a quill. She began to draft a letter to the ministry. It was, in her professional estimation, time to clarify some things about who had authority at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and it was absolutely time to address the question of unauthorized personnel operating freely on school grounds. She signed the letter, folded it, and attached it to the leg of a ministry owl with the satisfaction of someone certain they have already won. Chapter 3, The Weight of Pink, the Educational Decree, came on a Friday. Harry saw it go up on the notice board at breakfast, one of Umbridge's increasingly frequent proclamations, printed in that particular shade of ministry crimson that had started to feel less like official ink and more like a warning flare. He read it once standing up with a piece of toast in his hand, then read it again because the first time hadn't fully processed. By order of the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, all persons currently residing or operating on school grounds without formal ministry clearance or valid magical credentials shall be subject to immediate review and removal at the discretion of the High Inquisitor. Any student found associating with uncredentialed individuals outside of formally approved academic settings shall face suspension of school privileges pending investigation. He put the toast down. "That's about Wayne," Hermione said from beside him, her voice very quiet and very controlled, which meant she was considerably more upset than quiet and controlled suggested. "Obviously," Ron said. He was reading it with an expression that had moved through surprise and settled firmly in something harder. "She's found a way to make it official. She can't touch Dumbledore directly, so she's going after the people Dumbledore's brought in. Wayne's not Dumbledore's," Harry said. "Umbridge doesn't know that yet," Hermione said, "and honestly it might not matter. The decree gives her the authority regardless of who invited him." She looked at Harry. "He needs to know about this." "He already knows," Harry said. Both of them looked at him. "He knew this was coming," Harry said. "He told me 2 nights ago. He said she'd move soon, and when she did it would be through paper rather than direct confrontation because that's how she operates. She builds the legal framework first, and then acts inside it so there's nothing to challenge." He looked at the decree. He called it institutional armor, said it's harder to fight than anything physical because you can't punch paperwork. Ron squinted. "Can't you, though?" "In a manner of speaking," Harry said and pulled out his bag. He found Bruce not in the room of requirement but in the library. This should not have surprised him as much as it did. Bruce was at a table in the back corner with what appeared to be 6 books open simultaneously, cross-referencing something between them with the focused efficiency of a man who read the way other people breathed, constantly, automatically, without breaking anything else he was doing. He'd acquired a quill from somewhere, and there was parchment covered in notes beside him that Harry caught a glimpse of, diagrams, cross-references, something that looked like a timeline. He looked up when Harry sat down. "I saw it. How early did you see it?" "The owl left her office at 11:15 last night," Bruce said. "I tracked it to the edge of the Hogwarts wards and estimated ministry transit time at 8 to 12 hours given the weather. The decree was drafted before that, obviously. Probably Wednesday, after she saw us in the corridor near the room of requirement." Harry stared at him. "You tracked her owl." "I tracked all the owls leaving the castle after 10 p.m. Hers was the only one going to London." He looked back at his books. "Sit down properly if you're staying. You're hovering." Harry sat. He looked at the books. Hogwarts, a history, ministry legal precedents in magical governance, something called the boundaries of inquisitorial authority that looked old enough to be falling apart, and 3 others in languages Harry didn't recognize. "What are you looking for?" Harry asked. "The seam," Bruce said. Every piece of institutional overreach has a point where the authority being claimed exceeds the authority actually granted. Umbridge's decrees are broad and intimidating, and they have the Ministry's weight behind them, but the Ministry's authority over Hogwarts has specific legal limits. The school's charter, which predates the Ministry by about 400 years, places certain powers exclusively with the Board of Governors and the headmaster. He turned a page. She can issue decrees, she can inspect, she can threaten. What she cannot legally do is remove someone that Dumbledore has explicitly invited and granted access to, because that falls under the headmaster's residential authority. He looked at Harry. She knows this. The decree is designed to make you think she can do it and act accordingly. To make me think she can do it and leave voluntarily before she has to prove the authority she doesn't actually have. Harry absorbed this. So she's bluffing. She's projecting authority past its actual edge and betting that no one calls her on it. Bruce's expression was flat and completely unintimidated. People like Umbridge have been doing this for years, probably decades. It works because most people either don't know where the edge is or are too afraid of the institution to push back even when they do. And you're going to push back. I'm going to do something more effective than push back, Bruce said. He closed the old legal text with a sound like a decision. I'm going to make it impossible for her to maintain the illusion in front of an audience that won't forget what they saw. Harry leaned forward slightly. How? Bruce looked at him. Come to dinner tonight, he said, and bring Granger. I need her to help me find something in the Hogwarts founding charter, specifically the section on external educational appointments and the headmaster's plenary authority. She'll know where to look faster than I will. That's it, a charter. Knowledge of the charter is the preparation, Bruce said. The dinner is the stage. He went back to his reading. And Harry, he said, without looking up, tell the Weasley twins I need a word before 5. Harry stood up. He paused. You're going to enjoy this, he said, slightly accusingly. Bruce turned a page. I have no idea what you're talking about, he said, in the tone of a man who knew exactly what Harry was talking about. Fred and George arrived at the library at 4:50 with the synchronized energy of people who had been summoned for a purpose they already approved of before knowing what it was. Bruce looked at them both for a long moment when they sat down. Weasley and Weasley, he said. The very same, Fred confirmed. I've been looking at your products, Bruce said. George lit up. And the extendable ears are your best work from a technical standpoint. Range is impressive. The silencing seal on the listening end is near perfect. He paused. The Peruvian instant darkness powder. What are the coverage parameters? Fred and George exchanged a look that was less surprise and more confirmation of a theory they'd been quietly running. Roughly 20-foot radius, George said. Dissipates in about 90 seconds unless you add a second dose. Can you make it directional? A pause. The twins looked at each other again, this time with the particular focused intensity of people encountering a genuinely interesting problem. Meaning, the darkness goes that way rather than expanding outward, Fred said. Meaning it creates a corridor of darkness between 2 points rather than a sphere, Bruce said. For evacuation cover, primarily, if you need to move people from A to B without being seen. That's him. George pulled out a battered notebook. The powder works on a dispersion principle, so to make it directional you'd need some kind of a catalyst that creates surface tension in the darkness field. A modified Protego could work, Fred said. Cast in a plane rather than a dome, the magical adhesion properties of the powder are the issue, unless we change the base compound. They were writing and talking simultaneously, and Harry, watching from 2 seats down, had the odd sensation of watching 2 processors running in parallel, the same mind split into 2 bodies and able to work the problem from both sides at once. I also need to talk to you about the decoy detonators, Bruce said while they wrote. Fred looked up. What about them? They're reactive. They go off when someone interacts with them. I need something that goes off on a timer, or better yet, on a specific auditory trigger. George very slowly put his quill down and gave Bruce the look of a man who has just realized he is talking to a genuine peer. A trigger-activated detonator, he said. Is it possible? Yes, Fred said immediately. How quickly? End of next week if we skip astronomy, George said. Skip astronomy, Bruce said, and something moved in his expression that was the closest thing to mischief Harry had seen from him. Both of you, you understand what I'm doing here, don't you? I'm not asking you to make weapons. You're asking us to make options, Fred said with an enormous smile. Options are always better than weapons. Exactly right, Bruce said. The twins left the library 20 minutes later, looking like people who had just found a religion that finally made sense. Dinner in the Great Hall was always loud on Fridays. the accumulated exhale of a week's worth of lessons and Umbridge's inspections, and the low grinding anxiety that had settled over the school since the High Inquisitor's arrival. The volume gave things room to breathe that couldn't breathe anywhere quieter. Bruce sat down at the Gryffindor table. This was, in itself, a statement. He'd been eating in a side room off the kitchen since his arrival, Dumbledore's arrangement, discreet and out of the way. The fact that he was here now, at the main table, in full view of every student in the school, and of the high table where Umbridge sat between Flitwick and McGonagall with her permanent expression of decorated authority, that was not accidental. The noise around them didn't die exactly. It reorganized, the way noise does when something new enters a room, conversations rotating toward the new thing without their speakers entirely intending it. Umbridge noticed. Harry could see her noticing from 40 feet away, her small eyes fixing on Bruce with the particular quality of official displeasure. Hermione put a folder of notes on the table in front of Bruce. Founding Charter Section 9, the headmaster's residential and educational authority clauses, she said. Also Section 14, which covers external appointments and the board's role versus the ministry's role. I cross-referenced with the educational decree text, and there are 3 specific areas where she's claiming authority the charter doesn't grant her. I found 4, Bruce said, opening the folder. Hermione stiffened slightly. Then she leaned over and looked at his annotation. Where's the 4th? He pointed, she read. Her expression shifted through several stages and landed on impressed, which she immediately tried to cover with analytical. That's a reasonable reading, she said. It's the correct reading, he said. That's what I said, she said. Ron, eating his shepherd's pie, watched this exchange with visible entertainment. She's getting up, Harry said quietly. Umbridge was indeed getting up. She moved with the deliberate unhurriedness of someone who wanted everyone to see she was not rushing, was not flustered, was simply doing the routine and appropriate thing. She crossed the great hall with her hands folded in front of her, and the smile fixed in place, and students parted for her the way water parts for something unpleasant that you step around without fully acknowledging. She stopped behind Bruce. Mr. Wayne, she said, in the voice she used for addressing things she intended to remove. I believe you've received notification of the educational decree regarding uncredentialed. Decree 32, Bruce said. He didn't turn around. He was reading the charter notes. I have. A brief silence. She hadn't expected calm. She'd expected the slightly defensive scramble that authority projected into space usually produced. Then you'll understand that your continued presence in the main hall is covered by Section 9 of the Hogwarts Founding Charter, Bruce said, which grants the headmaster full residential authority over any adult present on school grounds by his explicit invitation, an authority which, per Section 14 of the same charter, supersedes ministry regulatory jurisdiction, except in cases of criminal prosecution. He turned a page. Decree 32 specifically exempts individuals operating under headmaster sanction in its own text, subsection C, paragraph 2. The decree, in other words, doesn't apply to me. He looked up at her. Would you like me to walk you through it? The great hall was not quiet. It was the particular shape of noise that happens when everyone is pretending not to listen with absolute precision. Umbridge's smile didn't change. It went somewhere else internally, somewhere colder, but the surface stayed fixed. You seem very well versed in wizarding law for a muggle, she said. I'm well versed in most things, Bruce said. He held her gaze without blinking, without moving, without the micro-expressions of discomfort that authority usually generated in people it targeted. He just looked at her, steady as a wall, and for the record, I'm not a muggle. I don't have magical ability. Those are different categories in your own classification system. You might want to review Chapter 6 of Standard Book of Spells Grade 1, the section on non-magical humans with documented exposure to. I'm well aware of the classification system, Umbridge said, sharply enough that the smile slipped a fraction. Then you know the distinction matters legally, Bruce said. Which means Decree 32's specific language about muggle restrictions also doesn't. This conversation is not finished, she said. I think it actually is, Bruce said pleasantly. The charter documentation is available in the school library if you want to verify. Granger can show you where. She's very helpful with research, though I imagine you already know that. Hermione, to her very great credit, managed to keep her expression almost entirely neutral, though her left hand gripped her pumpkin juice slightly harder than necessary. Umbridge looked at Bruce for a long moment. Her eyes said something that her face refused to. Then she turned and walked back to the high table. The noise reorganized again. Somewhere down the Gryffindor table, Fred Weasley started a slow clap that his brother joined, and that fizzled out quickly because several people shushed them, but the spirit of it hung in the air anyway. She won't forget that, Hermione said quietly. Good, Bruce said, returning to the charter. She shouldn't. She'll escalate, Harry said. I'm counting on it. Bruce looked at Harry. Umbridge's power base is the impression of invincibility. The moment students see that impression crack publicly, calmly, without drama, the impression starts coming apart. Every time she escalates from here, she'll look like someone compensating for a loss rather than someone executing from strength. He paused. We just changed the landscape. That's worth whatever she does next. Ron looked between Bruce and the high table and back. I genuinely think this might be the best Friday I've had all term, he said. She came for the DA on Tuesday. Not directly, not immediately. She'd spent the weekend building to it, which Harry now recognized as the pattern Bruce had described. 2 more educational decrees over the weekend, one banning unofficial student groups of more than 3, one requiring all study arrangements to be approved by the High Inquisitor's office. The decrees were posted, read, absorbed, and discussed in whispers across the school, with the specific low-grade fear of someone turning up the pressure on a boiler and waiting. By Monday, Umbridge had stationed inquisitorial squad members, a select group of students given badges and minor enforcement powers, overwhelmingly Slytherin, overwhelmingly insufferable, at key corridor intersections, and Draco Malfoy wore his badge with a pride that was indistinguishable from threat. He cornered Harry between herbology and lunch on Monday with Crabbe and Goyle positioned behind him like furniture that had learned to breathe. Interesting friend you've picked up, Potter, Malfoy said, the muggle in the costume, very impressive, defending himself with paperwork. He said the word the way you'd say something you were holding with 2 fingers over a bin. Umbridge is going to have him removed, personally, and when she does, he let the paws do the work it was designed to do. I wonder what happens to your little study group. You mean the study group that doesn't exist, Harry said. The study group that Umbridge already knows exists, Malfoy said. She just needs a name, needs someone to confirm it for her officially. He smiled. You know I could do that. Harry looked at him. He was doing the thing Bruce had been drilling into him, not feeling first, but seeing first. He saw Malfoy's posture, confident but over-articulated, performing certainty in a way that real certainty didn't require. He saw the badge on Malfoy's robes, new, important to him, the proof of chosen status he'd been angling for since first year. He saw the angle Malfoy was working, not actual threat but the shape of threat designed to make Harry react. Don't create a situation that works for him, Bruce's voice said in his memory. Create one that works for you. Draco, Harry said. Just the first name, like they were having a completely normal conversation, which was immediately disorienting. You've had 4 years to give Umbridge something she could actually use, and you haven't, which means you either don't have anything or you're holding it because the minute you give it to her you're just a resource she's used up. He tilted his head slightly. Which is it? Malfoy's expression flickered. Because, Harry continued, if it's the second one, and I think it's the second one, then what you actually want is to keep the threat alive as long as possible so you stay relevant to her. Which means you're not going to give her anything, not yet. He picked up his bag. So this conversation is just what? Checking what I'll do under pressure, reporting back that I looked worried. Crabbe and Goyle looked at Malfoy. Malfoy's jaw had done something tight and specific. Don't push me, Potter, he said. I'm not pushing you, Harry said. I'm explaining to you that I understand what you're doing. That's different. He met Malfoy's eyes steadily. And for what it's worth, you're smarter than people give you credit for. Umbridge sees you as a tool. I'd think about whether that's the role you want to be playing when this whole thing plays out. He walked away. He waited until he was around the corner before he exhaled slowly. His hands were completely steady. That was new. He told Bruce about it that afternoon in the room of requirement. Bruce listened to the whole account without interrupting. When Harry finished, Bruce looked at him for a moment. What did you want to do? He asked. When he started the threat thing, I wanted to tell him where to go, Harry said, pretty specifically and loudly. But you didn't. I saw what you'd see, Harry said. I saw the whole thing from outside at first, before I responded to it. And once I saw it from outside, the thing I wanted to do just looked wrong, like the wrong move on a board. How did it feel? Bruce asked. Harry considered. Like putting something down that I'd been carrying for a while, he said. The anger was still there. I just didn't need it for anything. Bruce nodded once, the nod of a man ticking something off a list. Malfoy's a problem we'll need to address properly at some point. He's going to give Umbridge something eventually, out of spite if nothing else. We need to control when and how. He paused. But that's next week's problem. Tonight, the door to the room of requirement burst open. Harry spun. Ginny Weasley stood in the doorway, breathing fast, her face doing the thing it did when she was running on urgency and functioning on adrenaline. Umbridge is on her way to the 7th floor corridor, she said. With the inquisitorial squad and two of her own, she's got ministry people with her, Harry, actual adult wizards from the ministry, and she's heading here. The room went completely still. How long? Bruce said. 5 minutes, Ginny said. Maybe less. Neville saw them near the 5th floor staircase and sent me running. Bruce was already moving, not rushing, but moving with the specific economy of someone for whom urgency and panic were entirely separate things. He was at the wall that held the equipment, touching various surfaces, and Harry watched him activate something. A faint blue light appeared at his fingers, a device Harry hadn't noticed clipped to Bruce's belt, and then Bruce was at the door looking both ways down the corridor. The room can change configuration, Bruce said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Harry said. Change it to an empty storage space. Every piece of equipment, every mark of what this room has been, gone. Can you do that? If I concentrate on what I need it to, do it now. Harry stood in the center of the room of requirement and thought about a storage room, an unused one, dust, broken furniture. Nothing that had been trained in or met in for weeks. He felt the room shift around him, not dramatically, just a gradual settling, surfaces changing, the training mat fading, the equipment dissolving back into the walls that had grown it. In 30 seconds it was a storage room. It smelled like dust and disuse and had the unmistakable quality of a space that had not been used for anything interesting in a long time. Good, Bruce said. He looked at Harry and Ginny. You were here looking for a quiet place to study. That's all. You haven't used this room for anything else. He looked at Ginny. You're good at this. Ginny looked at him with an expression that was half offended and half amused. I grew up with Fred and George, she said. I was maintaining cover stories before I could ride a broom. Stay here, Bruce said. Both of you, let her search. Where are you going? Harry asked. To have a conversation, Bruce said, and was out the door. He was waiting for Umbridge in the corridor. Not hiding, not positioned for tactical advantage. Just standing there in the middle of the 7th floor corridor, arms at his sides, as Umbridge rounded the corner with 4 inquisitorial squad students and 2 ministry officials in formal robes who looked like they'd been interrupted from something they'd consider more important. Umbridge stopped. She hadn't expected him. He could see that, the brief recalibration, the way the smile arrived a half-second late. Mr. Wayne, she said. Professor Umbridge, he said. You're on the 7th floor, she said. At this hour, that's interesting. I'm walking, he said. I do that. I understand the corridors are open. We have reason to believe that an unauthorized student group has been meeting in this corridor, she said. Her voice had that particular quality of enjoying what it's announcing. I'm here to investigate under the authority of Decree 31, Bruce said, which grants the High Inquisitor authority to investigate reports of unauthorized student gatherings. I know. He looked at the corridor around them. There's no gathering here. We'll be searching the adjacent rooms, she said. By all means, Bruce said. He didn't move. He didn't help. He just existed in the corridor with the specific, impermeable quality of someone who has nothing to hide and also nothing to prove, which was a combination that was very difficult to find purchase on. You seem very unconcerned, Umbridge said, in the voice she used when unconcerned meant you should be more concerned. Should I be? A person with something to hide generally, Professor Umbridge. He looked at her directly, and the quality of the look was the thing, not aggressive, not adversarial, just completely clear, like a window with no curtain. You have built an impressive apparatus of authority here. The decrees, the squad, the ministry support. It's well constructed. I've looked at it carefully and I can see the intelligence behind it. He paused, and the pause was exact. I can also see that you're frightened. The corridor went very still. One of the ministry officials shifted uncomfortably. Umbridge's smile went somewhere she couldn't quite retrieve it from in the moment she needed it. I beg your pardon, she said. Not of me, Bruce said. Of what happens if Dumbledore is right and Voldemort is real and back, and the ministry is wrong, and all of this. He gestured at the badges, the officials, the apparatus of her presence. Turns out to have been pointing in the wrong direction when the actual threat arrived. He held her gaze. That's what keeps you up, isn't it? Not the students, not the study groups. The possibility that you've invested everything in a version of safety that won't hold. Umbridge's face did something complicated and rapid that her professional control almost entirely suppressed. Search the rooms, she said to the inquisitorial squad without looking away from Bruce. Of course, he said, stepping aside completely. I hope you find what you're looking for. They searched every room on the 7th floor corridor. They found 3 broom cupboards, a room of broken desks, a very offended ghost named Sir Cadogan who threatened everyone with his stumpy horse, and in the room Harry and Ginny were sitting in, 2 students doing charms homework in a dusty storage space that smelled authentically of disuse. Umbridge stood in the doorway of that last room and looked at Harry for a long time. Harry looked back. He was sitting on a broken chair with Hermione's borrowed copy of Standard Book of Spells open on his knee, and he thought about the room he was in, about what it was. And he looked at Umbridge the way he'd looked at Malfoy, from outside the situation, seeing the whole board. "Studying Potter," she said. "It's quiet up here," Harry said. "Library's full on Tuesday evenings." She looked at him. Her eyes moved to Ginny, back to Harry, around the room, cataloging and finding nothing. "How industrious," she said. She left. Harry found Bruce on the astronomy tower at 10:30. He was starting to think this was simply where the man went to decompress, which was actually thinking about it, not so different from what Harry did. "She knows," Harry said. "She didn't find anything, but she knows. She knows something exists," Bruce said. "She doesn't know what it is or how many people, or where it actually operates from. That's an important distinction." He was looking out at the forest. "She'll be watching now. Every member of what was the DA is a person of interest to her." "So we stop," Harry said. "We change," Bruce said. "We don't gather in one place anymore. We train in smaller groups, 4 or 5 maximum in different locations, rotating on a schedule only I keep. No written communication. The twins' extendable ear network replaces meeting coordination, and the things we train, we change those too." "How? Less spell practice," Bruce said. "More situation training. I've been thinking about what you said about Voldemort's likely moves, infiltration, extraction, targeted strikes on individuals. Those are the scenarios we prepare for, not open battlefield dueling. Dumbledore won't like us reducing open spell practice," Harry said. "Dumbledore isn't in charge of this," Bruce said. "It wasn't harsh, just factual. He's agreed to give me the space. I'm using it." Harry looked out at the grounds. The forbidden forest was dark and moved at its edges in a way forests moved when something inside them was awake. "She said something today," he said. "Umbridge. She got this look when you said the thing about Voldemort being real, like you'd pushed on something that was already bruised," Bruce said. "Yeah, people like Umbridge aren't stupid," Bruce said. "That's the part people miss. They're not operating on stupidity. They're operating on fear managed by control, the belief that if you control the information, you control the outcome. The truth about Voldemort terrifies her not because she doesn't believe it on some level, but because believing it means the control structure fails. So she chooses not to believe it. She chooses the story where everything is manageable." He paused. "Knowing that makes her predictable. Predictable is useful." "Does it make you sympathetic to her?" Harry asked. He wasn't entirely sure why he asked it. Bruce was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "Understanding why someone does harm doesn't obligate sympathy. She's making a choice every day to protect her fear at the cost of these kids' safety. That she has reasons doesn't change the cost." He looked at Harry. "Be careful about conflating understanding and forgiveness. You can have one without the other." Harry thought about that. He thought about Voldemort, actually, about understanding what had made Tom Riddle, about Dumbledore's insistence that knowing the history mattered. He'd always resisted that, always felt the understanding asked something of him he wasn't ready to give. "You can understand him," Bruce said, reading the direction of Harry's thoughts with uncomfortable accuracy, "and still stop him. Understanding is a weapon. It's not an obligation." Harry breathed. The cold was real on his face, and the stars were real overhead, and the castle below him, with all 300 of its inhabitants sleeping or studying or worrying, was real, and all of it was, simultaneously, something to protect and something he had been placed inside without a choice. He was starting to think about the choice differently. "The DA," Harry said. "New structure, smaller groups. Are you going to train with us, actually in the sessions?" "Some of them," Bruce said. "Others I'll watch. The watching matters as much as the training. I need to see how each person moves under uncertainty, not just under my direction." "And Hermione? She's been researching combat applications of—" "I know," Bruce said. "She told me. It's good work. Give her more access to the restricted section and let her keep going." Harry looked at him. "You can't just give her access to the restricted section." "Dumbledore already did," Bruce said. "I asked him this morning." "You asked Dumbledore for restricted section access for Hermione." "I asked Dumbledore for restricted section access for anyone I'm working with who might benefit from it." He paused. He agreed. "As I said, he and I have an arrangement." Harry stared at him for a moment. "You are systematically fixing every problem in this school," he said. "I'm addressing variables," Bruce said. "Those are the same thing." "They're not. They really—" "Get some sleep, Potter." Harry went. He was smiling by the time he reached the 4th step, and he stepped over it cleanly, and didn't notice that he hadn't needed to think about it. Malfoy gave Umbridge the name of the DA on Wednesday morning. Harry knew it the moment he saw Malfoy's face at breakfast, the specific quality of someone who had just handed over something valuable and was monitoring the room for the consequences. By mid-morning, Umbridge had the original sign-up sheet, obtained through methods that would later involve a jar of Niffler lure and Dobby the house elf making a very bad decision, and by noon she was moving with the specific quality of someone who has just changed the terms of the game. She called Harry to her office at 2 o'clock. He went. He sat in the chair across from the pink desk in the pink office, under the watchful gaze of the decorative plates of kittens that followed movement with unblinking painted eyes, and he looked at the list she placed on the desk between them. 28 names, every member of Dumbledore's army. Quite an interesting document, Umbridge said. Particularly the name at the top. She looked at him with the smile that was a mask for something. Would you care to explain what Dumbledore's army is? Harry looked at the list. He thought about 28 people who had come to that first meeting in the Hog's Head, who had shown up because they were frightened and undertrained and refused to stop anyway. He thought about what Bruce had said about the ego being the first target. He thought about what it actually meant to protect people. It's a study group, Harry said. Defense against the dark arts, since we're not actually being taught any. Umbridge said in the way that meant she intended to destroy something and was simply deciding the order. And the name, Dumbledore's army. Whoever made that parchment had a sense of humor, Harry said. Umbridge looked at him for a long moment. She stood up, moved to the window, turned back to him with the kind of deliberate patience that was designed to produce discomfort in its recipient. I want you to understand something, Mr. Potter, she said. I am not your enemy. Okay, Harry said. She blinked. That wasn't the answer she'd expected. I am here to ensure this school operates correctly. I am here to ensure students receive appropriate guidance. Professor Umbridge, Harry said, and his voice came out calm, genuinely, surprisingly calm, the same way his hands had been steady with Malfoy. I don't think you're my enemy. I think you're someone doing what you believe is right with the tools you've been given, for reasons that make complete sense from where you're standing. He held her gaze. I also think that what you've been given is incomplete, and that one day soon you're going to be in a situation where the ministry's version of the truth isn't going to be enough to deal with what's actually in front of you. He paused. When that happens, I hope you remember that there were people here trying to prepare for it. The pink office was very quiet. Umbridge looked at him, really looked, past the mask and past the method, just for a fraction of a second, and Harry saw something there that was complicated and human and afraid and absolutely determined not to show any of that. Then the mask came back. 10 points from Gryffindor, she said. And detention Friday. Yes, Professor, Harry said. He stood up and left. In the corridor outside, he let out a breath that was slower and less steady than he'd managed inside, and he leaned against the stone wall for a moment and felt the truth of what had just happened settle into him. He'd been in that room and he'd been himself, fully himself, eyes open, seeing clearly, not reacting from fear or anger but from something else. Something that was starting to feel like the shape of who he was becoming. He pushed off the wall. He went to find Bruce. He had things to report, and he was starting to realize that reporting them mattered, not because Bruce needed to manage him, but because they were building something together, and what Harry had just done in that pink office was a brick. He walked faster. In the Slytherin common room that evening, Draco Malfoy sat by the fire and stared at the flag on his badge and felt, for the first time since he'd been given it, something that was not pride and was not entirely comfortable and did not have a name he wanted to give it. He'd handed over the list. He'd done what was expected of him. He was useful to Umbridge, which was what he'd wanted. He was positioned correctly, which was what his father would want. Everything was proceeding as intended. He kept thinking about what Potter had said in the corridor. You're smarter than people give you credit for. It wasn't a compliment. He was certain it wasn't a compliment. But it had the specific quality of something that refused to be forgotten. He stared at the fire for a long time. Chapter 4. Blood and Stone. The artifact arrived at Hogwarts on a Thursday night, under a disillusionment charm so sophisticated it took the castle's own ambient magic 40 minutes to register the disturbance. Bruce felt it first. Not magically, he had no magic, had never pretended otherwise, but because he'd spent the last 2 weeks mapping every fluctuation in the castle's environmental baseline. Temperature, airflow, the specific quality of silence in different corridors at different hours, the way the torches in the dungeons burned differently when something moved through the lower passages versus the upper ones. He'd built the map in his head the way he built every map, obsessively, completely, with the working assumption that the detail he didn't bother recording was the detail that would matter. At 11:43 p.m., the torches on the 4th floor dimmed for exactly 3 seconds and returned to normal. He was moving before the 3 seconds were up. Harry was in the middle of a dream about a corridor, Not the Scarflash kind, not the Voldemort kind, just an ordinary stress dream about a corridor that kept changing configuration before he could find the end, when something hit his window. Not Hedwig. Too fast, too small, and 3 successive taps in a pattern he'd come to recognize. He was out of bed before Ron stirred, had his glasses on and his wand in his hand before his feet were fully warm, and when he opened the window there was nothing there except a small black disc about the size of a galleon sitting on the sill. He'd seen it before. Bruce kept 3 of them on his belt. He turned it over. On the back, in Bruce's handwriting, compact, precise, zero wasted space, 4th floor. Now, quiet. Harry pulled on his invisibility cloak. The 4th floor was wrong in a way he felt before he saw anything confirming it. He'd been in this building for 4 years and knew its rhythms the way you knew the rhythms of a house you'd grown up in, not consciously, just bodily, the way you knew when a floorboard was about to creak before your foot hit it. The 4th floor at midnight should have had a particular quality of settled, occupied darkness. Instead, it had a quality of held breath, like the building itself was waiting. He found Bruce at the far end of the corridor, pressed to the wall beside a tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, completely still. No cowl. He was in the training clothes, which meant he'd been awake when the torches changed. Harry materialized beside him under the cloak. "How many?" Harry murmured. Bruce held up 3 fingers. "Where?" Bruce pointed down, then gestured to indicate a passage below, the one that connected to a little-used classroom near the charms corridor. Then he made a specific gesture with 2 fingers that Harry recognized from their training sessions. "Moving, not yet aware of us." "What are they after?" Harry breathed. Bruce pulled something from his belt, not a weapon, a small flat screen, dark surface that showed a schematic Harry recognized after a moment as a floor plan of Hogwarts. On the 4th floor, 3 moving dots, converging on a room Harry didn't immediately recognize. "What's in that room?" Harry whispered. "Right now," Bruce's voice was barely sound. "A ministry artifact that Dumbledore transported here last week for safekeeping, connected to the Department of Mysteries. Specifically, a memory vessel, one of several Voldemort has been trying to locate." He paused. "I've known it was here since Monday. I've been waiting to see if anyone moved on it." Harry stared at him. "You've known since Monday and you didn't." "I didn't know when," Bruce said, "or how many, or whether Dumbledore's countermeasures would be sufficient." He looked at Harry. "They weren't. 3 of them got through the outer ward about 40 minutes ago. Good enough to know what they're doing. This wasn't improvised. Someone gave them the ward configuration." "Malfoy," Harry said immediately. "Possibly, or someone higher." Bruce pocketed the schematic. "We have 2 options. Let them reach the artifact and intercept at extraction point. Riskier for the artifact, better for capturing at least one of them intact for questioning. Or intercept before they reach it, safer for the artifact, lower chance of capture." Harry processed this. Bruce was looking at him, waiting, and Harry realized with a start that this wasn't rhetorical. Bruce was asking him, actually asking, treating it as a genuine tactical decision worth Harry's input. He thought about it. Genuinely thought about it, the way he'd been practicing from outside the situation, bored first, feeling second. "The artifact's not the only thing at risk," Harry said. "If they get to it and we intercept at extraction, that's inside the castle. Students above, wards compromised. If we push them toward the exit during extraction, we're moving the fight closer to sleeping students." He paused. "Intercept before they reach it, control the location." Bruce looked at him for a fraction of a second with that particular expression. "Agreed," he said, "but we do this properly. What do you know about the 3 of them?" "Nothing. We haven't seen them." "Number, what do you know about Death Eaters operating in a small infiltration group on a retrieval mission? What does that team look like?" "What's the function split?" Harry thought. He thought about the graveyard, about the ministry battle that Dumbledore had described, about everything he'd laid out in the analytical session and everything Bruce had noted. Point, someone who knows the castle layout. Intel role, they already have the ward configuration, so they've been here before or have a source. Combat cover, at least 1, maybe 2, because they can't afford to move that deep into Hogwarts without someone who can handle an unexpected encounter. He paused. 3 people means 1 is doubled up. Probably the intel person is also running point and they have 2 combat. "Correct," Bruce said. "The intel person is the one we want. The other 2 will fight. We separate them." He looked at Harry with the look that meant the next part was non-negotiable. "You take 1 combat role, I take the other. The intel person is contained, not engaged. We want them conscious and able to answer questions." "You take 1 combat role," Harry said. "You don't have magic." "I'm aware," Bruce said. "They're Death Eaters," Harry said. "I'm aware of that too," Bruce said in exactly the same tone. "Follow my lead until I tell you otherwise. After that, your instinct, but aim first, act second, every time." Harry looked at him. "You've done things like this before." "Once or twice," Bruce said. Harry almost laughed. He kept it to a sharp exhale instead. "Let's go," he said. They moved through the fourth-floor corridor in a formation that Bruce had drilled, Harry under the cloak 5 feet behind and to the left, covering angles Bruce couldn't watch, while Bruce walked ahead at a pace that was fast but made no sound. In 3 weeks, Harry had learned enough about how Bruce moved to understand that the silence wasn't caution. It was technique, weight distribution, surface reading, the constant micro-adjustments that turned walking into something closer to water finding a path. The room was a classroom that hadn't been in regular use since before Harry had started at Hogwarts. He'd passed it 100 times without looking twice. Bruce stopped outside the door. The schematic came out again and he held it where Harry could see, crouching in the gap under the cloak. 2 dots near the back of the room, 1 dot just inside the door. One inside the door meant there was someone standing guard in the entry, the first combat role. The other 2 were at the back, which probably meant they'd found the artifact and were working on whatever magical containment surrounded it. Bruce pointed at the door, at Harry, then at himself. Then made a spreading gesture. "You go left, I go right." Harry nodded. Bruce counted down on his fingers. 3, 2. He opened the door. The Death Eater just inside spun. Male, masked, wand up in a fraction of a second, genuinely fast, trained, not a lower-rank foot soldier. And the spell he fired was a stunner that cracked bright red across the room and hit the wall where Bruce had been half a second before Bruce wasn't there anymore, because Bruce had dropped. He dropped completely, below the trajectory of the spell, hit the floor with one hand, and came back up from the left with momentum that had never stopped. And his elbow connected with the Death Eater's wand arm with the specific angle Harry had watched him drill 20 times on the mat, the one that transferred force directly to the wrist joint, and the wand went somewhere into the dark of the room. Harry was already moving. He'd come in left, saw the second combat Death Eater at the back spin away from the artifact at the sound of the door, and fired stupefied before the man had completed his turn. A clean hit, right in the chest, and the Death Eater went straight down. One stunned, one unarmed and currently occupied with Bruce. The third, the intel person, still working at the artifact, smaller frame, stopped the moment the room descended into noise, turned, and Harry saw the hands go up, wand held out to the side rather than raised. Not surrendering, Harry recognized, but calculating. Smart enough to know that with 2 colleagues down in 4 seconds, the math had changed. "Don't," Harry said. He had his wand on them directly. His voice was flat, not threatening, just factual. Behind him, Bruce and the first Death Eater, the disarmed one, were still in motion. Harry caught it peripherally. The Death Eater was fast without the wand, moved like someone who knew physical combat, not just magic, and threw himself at Bruce with genuine intent. Bruce let him. That was the thing Harry couldn't have described to anyone who hadn't seen it. Bruce let the Death Eater come to him, and then what happened was less a fight and more a controlled collapse. The Death Eater's own momentum redirected, his balance found and removed in the same movement, and then he was face down on the floor with Bruce's knee in his back and Bruce's hand on his wand arm at an angle that made movement genuinely inadvisable. The whole thing took 6 seconds. The room was still. "Wand down," Harry said to the intel Death Eater, quietly, all the way down. A pause. The person, woman Harry thought from the frame and the eyes behind the mask, looked at him. He saw the calculation happen in real time. The wand went down. "On the floor," Harry said. "Sit." She sat, incarcerous, Harry said, and cords bound her wrists behind her. He did the same to the stunned one and then went and crouched beside Bruce and the first Death Eater. "Incarcerous," he said again. The cords bound. Bruce stepped back. The room was very quiet except for breathing. Harry looked at the artifact on the table at the back. It was a small stone basin, like a pensive but darker, the surface of it showing not silver memory fluid but something that was close to black, slightly luminescent, sitting in a lead-lined box that was still mostly closed. He didn't go near it. "Is that what I think it is?" he said. "Part of one," Bruce said. He was checking the room, windows, other doors, ceiling, the rapid environmental assessment that never stopped. Memory vessel from the Department of Mysteries. Stores consciousness fragments, emotions, intentions, pieces of identity. Voldemort's been collecting them. He looked at Harry. "Dumbledore needs to know about this tonight." "I know." Harry looked at the 3 bound Death Eaters. "End them. The unconscious ones stay unconscious until Dumbledore decides what to do with them." He moved toward the woman who was sitting upright, back straight, watching them both with eyes that were not frightened. "Her we talked to." He crouched in front of her. Harry stood back and to the side, wand down but available, watching. The woman had dark eyes above the mask, older than Harry had expected, mid-40s maybe, with the bearing of someone who had been in a professional capacity of some kind before this. She looked at Bruce and didn't look at Harry, which was itself information. Who gave you the ward configuration? Bruce said. She said nothing. You're not a true believer, Bruce said. The way you moved when the fight started, you did the math. True believers don't do the math, they act on faith. You acted on survival instinct. He held her gaze. That means you have something to go back to, someone more likely. Which means you have an interest in getting out of here. I have nothing to say to you, she said. Her voice was controlled. Then listen, Bruce said. You were sent on a retrieval mission by someone who knew about this artifact, knew where it was stored, and knew the ward configuration for this castle. That's 3 separate intelligence failures originating from inside either the ministry or this school. You know which. He paused. Voldemort doesn't know you failed yet. That gives you a window, small one. After that window closes, you become a liability. She was very still. You don't have to tell me tonight, Bruce said. But when Dumbledore hands you to the ministry tomorrow, you lose any choice you have about how this goes. He stood. Think about what you want that window to look like. He walked away. Harry fell into step beside him near the door. She'll talk, Bruce said quietly. How do you know? She looked at you for the first time when I stood up, Bruce said. Not at me, at you. She recognized you not from tonight, from before. And whatever she thinks about Voldemort, recognizing Harry Potter and seeing you standing there calmly with your wand down and your eyes open is doing something to her assessment. He glanced back. She expected a scared kid. That's what she was briefed on. Harry absorbed this. He looked back at the woman. She was watching him with those dark eyes, and the mask was still on, but her posture had done something. A small, almost imperceptible adjustment, like something she'd been bracing for hadn't hit the way she'd planned for. I need to get Dumbledore, Harry said. I'll stay here, Bruce said. Take this. He pressed the communication disc into Harry's hand. If you need me moving, press once. If you need me moving fast, press 3 times. Harry took it. He was almost through the door when he turned back. You weren't worried, Harry said. In the fight, not for a second. I was concerned, Bruce said. Concern is useful, worry isn't. The Death Eater who attacked you physically with no wand, he was trained, Bruce said. Not bad, actually. He'd been taught to fight without a wand if necessary. Voldemort's more serious about that than people give him credit for. And, Harry said, and I've been fighting people who have forgotten more about physical combat than he'd ever been taught, Bruce said, with the matter-of-fact quality of someone reporting weather data. It wasn't close. Harry looked at him. At the way he was standing, balanced, relaxed, completely untroubled by what had just happened, with the specific quality of someone for whom this kind of night was not exceptional. He thought about what it must look like from the outside, from the Death Eater's perspective, or Umbridge's, or anyone who encountered this, a man with no magic who dropped into a room and took apart a trained Death Eater in 6 seconds and never raised his voice. What are you? Harry said, not unkindly, just wondering. Bruce looked at him for a moment. Prepared, he said. Harry went to get Dumbledore. Dumbledore arrived at the classroom at 10 past midnight in a dressing gown that somehow still conveyed complete authority. He looked at the 3 bound Death Eaters, the artifact in its lead-lined box, and Bruce standing in the center of it, all with his arms folded, and his expression moved through several things very quickly before settling on something that was equal parts impressed and unsettled. Well, Dumbledore said, the memory vessel is intact, Bruce said. Your wards failed at approximately 11:45. Entry point was the North Passage, 3rd floor junction. Whoever configured the ward bypass knew the specific frequency your detection charms operate on, which suggests either a current or former member of your staff. Dumbledore's eyes moved to the woman who was still sitting, watching. He looked at her for a long time with an expression Harry couldn't fully read. Miriam, Dumbledore said quietly. The woman Miriam looked up at him. You were a ministry unspeakable, Dumbledore said. 12 years in the Department of Mysteries. He sounded sad in a way that was specific and not performed. When did he turn you? Pause. My son, she said. He has my son. The room went very quiet. Bruce's expression did the thing it sometimes did, fractional, rapid, and gone. But Harry caught it, the same grief recognition he'd seen during the graveyard account, the specific response to a person who had been leveraged at the most vulnerable possible angle. We will find him, Dumbledore said. He's been with them for 3 months, Miriam said. Her voice cracked on the last word and recovered. I've given them everything they've asked for, ward configurations, ministry protocols, artifact locations. She looked at the floor. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, Bruce said quietly, not cruelly, just true. She looked at him. And you made it, he continued. Every time, because the alternative was worse. That's not weakness, that's a calculation a parent makes when the options are both impossible. He held her gaze. But we need to know everything you gave them. Everything. Not because we want to punish you. Because we need to know what's exposed before they use it. Miriam looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore nodded once, the nod of a man who had decided something and was at peace with it. All right, she said. Harry stood in the corridor outside while Dumbledore and Bruce talked to Miriam. He stood with his back to the wall and his hands in his pockets and thought about what a woman had done for her son, and what that said about Voldemort, not his power, but his method. The thing Bruce had made him understand about how an enemy operated. Voldemort didn't just use dark magic. He found what you loved and he wrapped a chain around it and waited. Harry thought about Ron, about Hermione, about Ginny and Neville and Luna and every person whose name had been on that sign-up sheet. He thought about what he would do if Voldemort had one of them. He thought about it for a long time, honestly, without flinching away from the answer. Then he thought about what Bruce had said. You make yourself into something the problem can't solve. And what that meant in practice, it meant you became someone that Voldemort couldn't leverage, not because you had no love, but because you were prepared enough that no one you loved had to be the thing that undid you. You protected them not just physically, but strategically. You made them safe, you made yourself safe, you made the equation impossible to exploit. It wasn't a cold thought. It was one of the warmest thoughts he'd had in months. The door opened. Bruce came out. He leaned against the wall beside Harry without speaking for a moment. Her son, Harry said. Is he alive? Probably, Bruce said. Voldemort keeps leverage alive as long as it's working. The moment it's not working, he didn't finish the sentence. We need to find him. Already thinking about it. How? Bruce looked at the ceiling. She knows where she last delivered information. She knows the contact point. Contact points leave traces, magical ones especially, because whatever ward configuration she was given, that configuration was generated somewhere specific, and that somewhere specific has a signature. He looked at Harry. Hermione. She can trace the signature. She can help me understand how to trace it. The actual tracing will involve skills I have and she doesn't. He paused. We'll need a week, maybe 2. Dumbledore will want to handle it officially, Harry said. Dumbledore can handle it officially in parallel, Bruce said. Official channels in a war with an enemy who's inside the official channels move slower than they need to. He looked at Harry directly. This is the part where I tell you the thing you're not going to want to hear. Harry straightened slightly. Tonight changes the timeline, Bruce said. Whoever gave Voldemort the ward configuration will know the mission failed. They'll go quiet for a while, then they'll find a different angle. The window for the next strike is shorter than it was yesterday. He paused. And the rift, the dimensional one. He looked away. I picked up a geomagnetic reading from the North Grounds at 9 p.m. tonight. Weak early stage, but consistent with Lazarus overflow precursors. Harry's stomach went somewhere cold. So the rift is opening, Harry said. Starting to, Bruce said. Weeks out still. But yes, the corridor was very quiet. How many weeks? Harry asked. 3, Bruce said. Maybe 4 if the magnetic cycle runs slow. Harry looked at the floor. He did the math. 3 weeks. Everything they'd been building, the training, the sessions, the restructured DA, the understanding between them that had gone from nothing to something he couldn't imagine the absence of. 3 weeks. Then we use 3 weeks, Harry said. He said it the way you said something when you'd already processed the grief of it and come out the other side carrying it rather than being buried by it. He felt Bruce register this, felt the slight shift in the air. Yes, Bruce said, we use 3 weeks. What's the priority? Harry said. In order, what do we do first? Bruce looked at him for a moment, that look again, the recognition one, and then he was in motion, walking, and Harry fell into step beside him automatically. First, we get Miriam's son out of wherever he is, Bruce said, partly because it's right and partly because a freed asset is a source of intelligence we don't currently have. Second, the ward infiltration source inside Hogwarts gets identified. I have 3 candidates, and I want Hermione's input on the second one, because her instinct about people in institutional authority is better than mine. He was walking at that pace he had, purposeful and quiet simultaneously. Third, the DA sessions go to daily. Not everyone at once, smaller groups, but every group every day. Because whatever Voldemort does next, he'll try for inside this castle before he tries for anything else, and everyone in this school who knows how to fight needs to be as ready as we can make them in 3 weeks. And fourth, Harry said, because there was clearly a fourth. Bruce was quiet for a moment. Fourth, he said, we address the prophecy. Harry stopped walking. Bruce stopped too, turned to face him. You know about it, Harry said. I knew you knew, you implied it in the first session. I know enough, Bruce said. I know it exists. I know Voldemort wants the full recording of it and that it's kept in the Department of Mysteries. I know Dumbledore knows what it says. He paused. I don't know what it says. Neither do I, Harry said. Not fully. I know that too, Bruce said. Dumbledore won't tell me. I know that too, Bruce said again. Harry stood in the corridor with the castle around him, all stone and history and sleeping children, and felt the weight of everything that was being managed around him rather than told to him, and felt, right now, tonight, after what had just happened in that classroom, that the weight had changed shape somehow. It was still there. It was still his. But he was standing differently under it. You're going to make him tell me, Harry said. Before you go. Before I go, Bruce confirmed, you will know everything that pertains to your own life, every piece of it, not because Dumbledore wants to tell you, but because you have an absolute right to it, and I will not leave you here without it. He held Harry's gaze. I promised you eyes open. I keep my promises. Harry believed him. He believed him with the specific certainty that came not from faith, but from 3 weeks of watching a person be exactly as good as their word. Okay, Harry said. Okay, Bruce said, and they walked. Ron was awake when Harry got back to the dormitory. He was sitting on his bed in the dark with his Chudley Cannon's poster barely visible above him, and he looked at Harry when Harry came in and pulled off the invisibility cloak. I heard you leave, Ron said. Were you going to follow? Ron was quiet for a moment. I thought about it, he said. Then I thought about what Wayne said about the difference between instinct and strategy. He paused. Figured if you needed me, you'd signal. Harry sat on his own bed. He told Ron quietly, very quietly, Neville was asleep and could sleep through most things, but some habits died hard. What had happened? The Death Eaters, the artifact, Miriam and her son, Bruce's timeline on the rift. Ron listened. He didn't interrupt. He absorbed it with the situational intelligence that Bruce had named out loud 2 weeks ago, the board reading, the pattern recognition, and when Harry finished, Ron was quiet for a moment. 3 weeks, Ron said. 3 weeks. Right, Ron lay back on his bed. Then we've got 3 weeks to become completely different people. We're not becoming different people, Harry said. Better people then, Ron said. More prepared people, whatever the word is. More ourselves, maybe, Harry said. That's what it feels like. Ron was quiet for a moment. Then, he's good for you, you know. Wayne, not in a soft way, in the actual way. He turned his head. Like you're angry less, or when you are angry it goes somewhere instead of just burning. I've been thinking about that, Harry said. About the anger. It was always there, Ron said. Even first year. This thing in you that just flares, and we all just worked around it, kind of. Hermione and me worked around the edges of it. Why didn't you ever say something? Ron shrugged with one shoulder. Because it was never wrong, was it? The anger. It was always pointed at something that deserved it, just imprecise sometimes. He looked back at the ceiling. Wayne gave it a target instead of just a direction. Harry thought about this for a while. What happens when he's gone? Harry said. Ron was quiet for a long time. Then you're the person he made you, Ron said, which is what he's been building toward all along, isn't it? That's the point. He's not going to be here, so he's making sure you don't need him to be. Harry stared at the ceiling. When did you get wise? He said. Mate, I've always been wise, Ron said. You've all just been too busy watching Hermione. Harry laughed into the dark, quiet and genuine, the kind that comes from somewhere real and doesn't need an audience. The next morning, Bruce came to breakfast. He came to breakfast and he sat down and he ate, and by this point he'd been at the table enough times that it wasn't remarkable to the Gryffindors anymore and only slightly remarkable to the rest of the school. What was remarkable was that he brought a notepad, muggle paper, a pen, and spent the meal writing something while simultaneously listening to every conversation within 8 feet. Hermione slid into the seat beside him. I heard about last night. From Harry. From a portrait in the 4th floor corridor that was apparently very excited about it, she said. I had to promise not to tell anyone that Sir Cadogan described you as the Dark Knight of magnificent bearing before it would stop repeating the story. Bruce looked at her with an expression that was absolutely not a smile. The ward trace, he said. I need you to walk me through the theoretical foundation for magical signature identification, not the application, the theory. If you were building a system to generate ward configurations remotely, how would you contain the magical signature of the source? Hermione's eyes lit up in the way they did when someone gave her a problem worth the full capacity of her brain. You couldn't fully contain it, she said immediately. Magical signatures are inherent to the caster. You can mask, you can diffuse, you can layer false signatures over the top, but underneath there's always the base resonance. She pulled his notepad toward her. May I? He slid it toward her. She started writing and Bruce watched what she wrote, and they had a conversation over breakfast that Harry listened to and understood maybe 60% of, and the 40% he didn't understand he watched Ron try to follow and fail and eventually give up with a kind of cheerful resignation. She's amazing, Ginny said quietly, sitting down across from Harry. She really is, Harry agreed. He pushes her harder than any teacher she's ever had, Ginny said, watching Hermione sketch something complicated on the notepad while Bruce asked rapid-fire questions. She's not used to someone who keeps up. None of us were used to someone who keeps up, Harry said. Ginny looked at him. Her eyes were direct in the way they always were, never quite looking away when other people would. You're different, she said. Am I? In the corridors, she said, the way you walk. You're not waiting for something to hit you anymore. You're watching. She paused. Malfoy's scared of you now, properly. Harry blinked. Malfoy's not scared of me. He watches you the way you used to watch him, Ginny said, like you're the unpredictable variable. She picked up a piece of toast. It's very satisfying to observe. Harry looked at her for a moment. Something warm moved across his chest that had nothing to do with the prophecy or the training or Voldemort. Ginny, he said, thanks for last night, the warning. She shrugged, but her ears went slightly pink. Someone had to run fast, she said. You ran very fast. I grew up with 6 brothers, she said, running fast or getting left behind. They sat together in the comfortable way that meant they'd stopped needing to fill every gap, and Harry watched Bruce and Hermione solve problems across the notepad and felt the morning settle around him. The particular quality of a day that had something hard in it already survived and something harder still ahead, and somehow being completely ready for both. That afternoon, Malfoy cornered Bruce in the library. Harry wasn't there. He heard about it afterward from Neville, who had been 3 shelves away trying to find a book on defensive herbology and had frozen in place rather than reveal himself. You have no authority here, Malfoy said by Neville's account, in the voice he used when he was certain of a position but wanted someone to confirm it. Bruce had looked up from whatever he was reading. He'd looked at Malfoy for a moment. Why are you here? Bruce said. Malfoy had apparently been expecting something different from the first word. What? Why are you here? Bruce said again. Right now, this conversation. What do you want from it? A pause. To tell you that Umbridge is. No, Bruce said. That's the cover. What do you actually want? Neville said the silence that followed was very long. I want to know, Malfoy said finally, if you think this works, any of it. What you're doing with Potter. A pause. I want to know if it actually makes a difference. Bruce had looked at him for a long time. Yes, he said. That's it, just yes. Do you want a qualification? Whether it makes a difference depends entirely on whether the person does the work, Bruce said. Harry does the work, every time without exception, even when it's costing him something. He paused. Is that what you're asking, whether someone who works could make it work? I'm not asking. You came to this library and asked me a direct question, Bruce said. I'm giving you a direct answer. The only thing I'll add is this. The side you're on right now has a ceiling. There is a specific amount of respect and safety and agency available to you in Voldemort's world, and you are already close to it, and you are smart enough to know it. He looked back at his book. Whether you do anything with that knowledge is your choice. Malfoy had stood there for a moment. Then he'd walked out. Neville had told Harry this story with wide eyes and the specific expression of someone who had been in a library for a routine reason and accidentally witnessed a turning point. Harry sat with the story. He thought about Malfoy standing in the corridor after the list went to Umbridge, the specific look on his face that Harry had filed away without naming. He thought about what Bruce was able to see in people, not generously, not with any soft focus, but accurately, precisely. He thought about 3 weeks. He went to the room of requirement and started training by himself, running the fall drills, the body position sequences, the thing Bruce had showed him last week about maintaining your center of gravity under lateral pressure. He did them until his muscles burned, and then he kept going, because 3 weeks was 3 weeks, and every hour inside it mattered. Outside, somewhere above the forbidden forest, the sky at the horizon showed the faintest discoloration, barely perceptible, a breath of violet at the edge of the clouds, gone before you could be sure it was there. The rift was dreaming. Not yet, but soon. Chapter 5. Everything Dumbledore knows the ward infiltration source had a name by Wednesday. It was Dawlish. Not a teacher, not a student. A ministry Auror who had been rotating through Hogwarts on Umbridge's security detail for the past 3 weeks, with enough legitimate access to the castle's outer perimeter that no one had flagged his presence near the ward anchors on the north face. Hermione had traced the magical signature through a process she and Bruce spent 48 hours developing together, cross-referencing the specific resonance pattern in the ward bypass against the ministry's published register of credentialed spellwork practitioners, which was publicly available if you knew it existed, and only Hermione had apparently known it existed. She brought the name to Bruce on a Wednesday morning with the expression of someone who had expected to feel triumphant and instead felt tired. Dawlish, Bruce said, reading the parchment. He's been under Umbridge's authority since she arrived, Hermione said. Which means either she directed this or she has no idea one of her own people is feeding Voldemort intelligence, and I genuinely don't know which is worse. The second one, Bruce said. The first means the Ministry is actively working against Dumbledore. The second means Voldemort has penetrated Umbridge's operation without her knowing, which means he's further inside the Ministry than anyone's accounted for. Hermione sat down. We have to tell Dumbledore. We tell Dumbledore today, Bruce said. But first, he looked at her. Does Dawlish know we've identified him? The signature trace is completely passive. He'd have no way of knowing. Then we don't move on him yet, Bruce said. A known source leaking known information is an asset. We can feed him something specific, something that points Voldemort in a direction we choose and see where it lands. He paused. Dumbledore will want to consult before we do that. We tell him today, we give him the trace documentation, and we let him decide the timeline. Hermione looked at him. You're deferring to Dumbledore. On this, yes. You don't defer to Dumbledore on anything. I defer to Dumbledore on things where his knowledge of the political landscape significantly exceeds mine, Bruce said, which is specific and narrow. Ministry internal structure, historical wizarding precedent, the specific personalities of the people involved, those are his territory. Tactical execution is mine. He looked at her. Knowing the difference between your expertise and someone else's isn't weakness, it's resource allocation. Hermione looked at him with that expression, the one where she was refiling information into a better organized system. I'll get the full documentation together, she said. One more thing, Bruce said. Miriam's son, Hermione straightened. I have a location, Bruce said. General, not specific, a property in the Scottish Highlands that appears in historical Death Eater records as a secondary holding. Miriam confirmed a meeting took place there 6 weeks ago. He slid a map across the table. I want your reading of the magical security profile. What would a Death Eater safe house in 1995 look like in terms of wards, concealment charms, alarm systems? Hermione looked at the map. This is a real operation, she said. It's a planning exercise. It's not a planning exercise, Hermione. You're going to go get him, she said, yourself. Before you tell Dumbledore, because you know Dumbledore will slow it down with procedure and oversight, and the Ministry's involvement in any extraction will. I'm going to tell Dumbledore today, Bruce said. And if his timeline for action is within 48 hours, I'll wait for his plan. If it's not, you'll go anyway, she said. I'll go anyway, he confirmed. A pause. I want to come, she said. No, Bruce said. I know more about magical security than anyone on this. You're 16, Bruce said, and you're more valuable here than you know. If I go and something goes wrong, this school needs you functional. He held her gaze. That's not me diminishing what you can do. That's me being honest about priority. Hermione was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that was wrestling, not accepting. Send me everything about the property, she said finally. I'll give you a full security assessment by tonight. Every ward type, every concealment variation, every alarm signature common to that period of Death Eater activity. She picked up her quill. If you're going in with everything I know. That's what I was counting on, Bruce said. She looked at him, something moved in her expression that was fond and exasperated and genuine. You're infuriating, she said. I've been told, he said, and went back to work. He went to Dumbledore that afternoon. Harry knew this because Bruce told him he was going and asked him to come. Not to speak, to listen, to be in the room, to hear what was said directly rather than having it pass through anyone's interpretation. Dumbledore was at his desk when they arrived, and he looked at them both with that blue gaze that took things in without showing what it did with them. Bruce laid the trace documentation on the desk. Dawlish, he said. Dumbledore looked at the parchment. For a man who rarely showed surprise in its raw form, the slight change in his expression carried weight. You're certain, Dumbledore said. Hermione's methodology is sound, Bruce said. The signature trace is unambiguous. Dumbledore set the parchment down. He looked at it for a moment, then stood and moved to the window, looking out at the grounds with his hands behind his back. This is deeply concerning news, he said. I know, Bruce said. I want to use him, feed him specific false intelligence and track where it goes. A reasonable approach, Dumbledore said. The timing would be now, Bruce said. The longer we wait, the greater the risk he discovers we've identified him and goes dark. We have a window of perhaps a week before normal paranoia starts making him check his own tracks. He paused. I also need to discuss the safe house. Dumbledore turned. His eyes moved to Harry briefly, then back to Bruce, and something in the movement of his gaze registered the intentionality of Harry being here, present included. Miriam's son, Dumbledore said. I have a location, Bruce said. General but workable. I want to move within 48 hours. The order, Dumbledore began, can be briefed afterward, Bruce said. or during if you want to send someone with me. But I'm not waiting for a committee to debate extraction parameters while a 19-year-old is held in a building somewhere because his mother was in the wrong job at the wrong time. The silence in the office was the specific kind that happened when one person was right and another person was trying to find the responsible version of agreeing. Take Lupin, Dumbledore said. I'll take Lupin, Bruce said. And you will not, Dumbledore stopped. He looked at Bruce with those ancient eyes. You understand that my asking you not to take unnecessary risks is going to sound rather hollow given everything you've done since you arrived. Yes, Bruce said, nevertheless. Come back, Mr. Wayne. Dumbledore looked at him with something that Harry couldn't name precisely, not affection, not quite, but something adjacent to it, something that respected weight. I find I've grown accustomed to the complications you introduce. I'll come back, Bruce said. He moved toward the door and stopped. And we need to talk about the prophecy. The office went very still. We do, Dumbledore said. Not today, Bruce said. I want the mission done first. Then we talk about the prophecy, all three of us. He didn't look at Harry when he said it, but Harry felt it, all three of us. In this office, with everything on the table. A very long pause. Agreed, Dumbledore said. Bruce left for the Highlands on Thursday morning before dawn, with Lupin and without fanfare. Harry woke to find the communication disc on his bedside table, not the usual signal disc, a different one. Heavier. On the back, if something goes wrong and I'm not back by nightfall, tell Dumbledore, don't come after me. The 3 weeks we have left are more important than one night. BW, Harry read it twice. He spent Thursday running DA sessions, 3 groups in rotation through the day, breakfast to first period, lunch break after dinner. The groups were small and focused, and the quality of what they were doing had changed so substantially from the first DA session in the Hog's Head that it was almost a different discipline. Less about spell competition and more about thinking under pressure, about reading an opponent, about the 3 seconds before a fight when everything is still information and nothing has been decided. Neville, who had spent 4 years being the reliable but overlooked member of whatever group he was in, was turning into something remarkable. Harry had noticed it over the last 2 weeks, the way Neville moved in exercises, the way his magic responded when he stopped second-guessing it. In the afternoon session, Neville disarmed 3 different opponents, in succession with a fluidity that would have been unrecognizable to anyone who'd known him in first year. That was excellent, Harry said. Neville looked at his wand like he was checking it had changed without his permission. I keep waiting for it to stop working, he said. Stop waiting, Harry said. Start planning the next one. Neville looked at him. Then he grinned, not the tentative, apologetic grin of someone who didn't quite believe they'd earned the right to be happy, but the wide, unguarded grin of someone discovering what they were actually capable of. Right, he said. Yeah, okay. Luna Lovegood was in the late session, and she was, as always, impossible to categorize. She fought the way she moved through the world, in apparent non sequitur that resolved, at the last second, into something perfectly precise. She'd managed to completely baffle Seamus Finnegan for 40 straight seconds by not doing any of the things he expected, and then hitting him with a perfectly placed Expelliarmus from a direction he hadn't been watching, because she'd spent the entire engagement not appearing threatening. You were setting him up for 30 seconds, Harry said. The Nargle migration patterns in the North Tower suggest that misdirection is the optimal approach for October, Luna said. Harry looked at her. You know, I think you might be, actually genuinely terrifying. Thank you, Luna said, and drifted off to talk to Ginny. Bruce came back at 7 in the evening. He walked into the Great Hall during dinner with Lupin, both of them tired in the bone-deep way that comes from a day that asked for everything. There was a cut on Bruce's jaw that hadn't been there that morning, and Lupin had a new tear in his robes and was walking with a very slight preference for his left side. Harry read the room before he moved, saw that both of them were functional, that the specific quality of Bruce's posture was satisfied tired rather than damaged tired, and that Lupin was already reaching for the food with the particular focused enthusiasm of someone whose body needed immediate restocking. Harry met Bruce's eyes from across the hall. Bruce gave the smallest nod. The boy was alive. Harry exhaled and went back to his dinner. Afterward, in the corridor near the library, how bad was it? Harry asked. 4 of them, Bruce said. The property had 2 interior wards and a perimeter curse that Lupin handled. The 4 were competent, not elite, but trained. We didn't announce ourselves. Miriam's son, 19 years old, scared, dehydrated, couple of days without proper food. Bruce's jaw tightened slightly on this, the specific anger of someone who found the mistreatment of someone defenseless contemptible at a cellular level. He'll need time. He's with Dumbledore's people now. You got him out. We got him out, Bruce said. Lupin was excellent for the record. He knew the ward's signatures from his first war, saved us significant time. Is he? Harry looked down the corridor, the direction Lupin had gone. He took a hit, one curse, glancing. He's fine. He's had much worse and he knows it. Bruce looked at Harry. How were the sessions today? Harry shook his head slightly. You just got back from extracting a hostage from Death Eaters and you're asking about the training sessions. Those aren't mutually exclusive priorities, Bruce said. Neville, Harry said. You should have seen him today. Something clicked. Bruce nodded. The genuine satisfaction in it was quiet but unmistakable. It clicked for him in week 2, Bruce said. I've been watching it build. You've been watching everyone, Harry said. That's the job, Bruce said. Is it also the job to? Harry stopped, considered how to say the next thing. Is it the job to make Neville Longbottom look at himself differently? Because that's what's happening. It's not just fighting. It's every person in those sessions is walking out different, not just better prepared, different about themselves. Bruce was quiet for a moment. The training is the mechanism, he said. The difference is what happens when someone discovers they're capable of something they'd been told they couldn't do. I'm not doing that. I'm just removing the ceiling that was never real. Harry looked at him. You do that, Harry said. You find the ceiling that isn't real and you just take it down, without any drama, like it's obvious. It usually is obvious, Bruce said, from the outside. Not to the person living under it, Harry said. Bruce looked at him for a moment. Something passed across his expression, brief and genuine, and something he didn't comment on. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we talk to Dumbledore. Friday morning. Dumbledore's office at 9 a.m. All 3 of them. Harry had barely slept. Not from anxiety, exactly, but from the specific restlessness of standing at the edge of something that was going to change the shape of the world you were standing in, and knowing it, and not being able to accelerate it. He sat in the chair across from Dumbledore's desk. Bruce stood to the side, which was where Bruce preferred to be in rooms, never fully settled, always slightly positioned for mobility. The portraits on the walls were pretending very hard not to pay attention, which meant they were paying complete attention. Dumbledore looked at Harry over his spectacles. Harry, he said, and the way he said it was different from how he'd said it all year, less managed, less careful, like putting something down that had gotten heavy. Tell him about the prophecy, Bruce said. Not aggressively, just exactly and only that. Dumbledore looked at Bruce, then back at Harry. He stopped, started again. I have been managing information this year in a way that I believed was protecting you. I understand increasingly that it has not had that effect. He was quiet for a moment. The prophecy, Harry, the full text. He spoke it. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The office was very quiet when Dumbledore finished. Harry sat with the words. He'd known pieces, suspected more. But hearing the full thing, cleanly and completely, in Dumbledore's voice without any qualification wrapped around it, it was different from imagining it. It was like the difference between being told a door existed and having someone open it. Either must die at the hand of the other. Neither can live while the other survives. He sat with it for a long time. Dumbledore let him. Bruce didn't move. Power he knows not, Harry said finally. That's the piece that matters, isn't it? The piece you've been protecting. Dumbledore looked at him. Yes, and you know what it is, Harry said. I believe I do, Dumbledore said. I believe it is love, Harry. The capacity you have to love, wholly, instinctively, without calculation, is something Voldemort is constitutionally incapable of understanding. He cannot model it. He cannot account for it. When you act from it, you become unpredictable to him in ways that his considerable intelligence cannot compensate for. Harry looked at his hands. He thought about what Bruce had said weeks ago. The day it doesn't cost something is the day you've stopped being human. He thought about Miriam and her son, about the chain around what you loved, about the difference between love as vulnerability and love as what? Armor, direction, power. He marked me as his equal, Harry said. He did, Dumbledore said, which means the prophecy was partially his choice. He chose me. He could have chosen Neville. The prophecy fits Neville too, you said. Dumbledore looked at him with something that was unmistakably respect. You've worked that out. It means the prophecy it's not a fixed thing, Harry said. It's not my destiny in the sense of something written into the universe. It's a self-fulfilling mechanism. He chose me, he marked me, the mark connected us, the connection changes everything. But the choice was his, not the universe's. He looked at Dumbledore. I'm not bound to this because I was born to it. I'm bound to it because he decided I was. Yes, Dumbledore said quietly. So I'm choosing it back, Harry said. Not because I have to, because I'm the one who's prepared and I'm the one who knows what he is and I'm the one who I choose it. The silence in the office had a different quality than the silences before. Bruce looked at Harry from his position by the wall and his expression was doing the thing, the recognition, and this time he didn't look away from it. He just let it be there. "Excellent," Dumbledore said. He said it softly, and it was not the grandfatherly excellent of a teacher approving an answer. It was the profound excellent of a very old man watching something he'd hoped for arrive in a form he hadn't anticipated. "Now," Bruce said, "the Horcruxes." Dumbledore went still. "You've been destroying them," Bruce said, "piece by piece. The ring, that's where the hand injury came from. The diary, second year, Harry's already done one without knowing what it was. You have a list and you've been working through it, and at the end of the list is the last piece of his soul." He paused. "Tell him." Dumbledore looked at Bruce for a very long moment. "How?" Dumbledore said. "The memory vessel in the artifact from Thursday," Bruce said. "I've been reading ministry records on soul magic. The vessel is designed to store consciousness fragments, the same mechanism as a Horcrux, different application. Once I understood what the vessel was, I understood what Voldemort had been building." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "And I understood why you've been keeping Harry alive but not making him central to the Horcrux hunt, because you know something about the seventh one, the one you haven't told him." Harry looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked at his desk. "Tell him," Bruce said, quiet. "Absolute, not a request." Dumbledore looked up at Harry, and in that moment, finally in that moment, he looked exactly as old as he was, all of it visible. All the weight of all the decisions and all the years and all the people those decisions had cost. "On the night Voldemort killed your parents," Dumbledore said, "and turned his wand on you when his curse rebounded, his soul was so unstable, so fragmented from the Horcruxes he had already created, that the rebounding force shattered another piece of it loose." He stopped. That piece, it had nowhere to go but into the only living thing in that room. He looked at Harry. "Harry," the fire crackled. A portrait coughed softly. "I'm one," Harry said. His voice was completely even. "I'm one of them." "Yes," Dumbledore said. The word sat in the room like a stone dropped in water, rings spreading outward. "That's why," Harry said, working through it in real time, his voice still flat and controlled in a way he could feel taking effort. "You've been keeping me at arm's length this year. Because if you look at me, if you care too much, what needs to happen to destroy the last Horcrux becomes something you might not be able to make yourself do." Dumbledore closed his eyes. "Yes." Harry stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to both of them and looked out at the grounds, the lake, the forest, the Quidditch pitch, and held the information in his hands and turned it over and looked at it from every angle. He was a Horcrux. A living fragment of Voldemort's soul had been sitting behind his scar for 14 years. That was a thing. That was a genuinely terrible thing, and his hands were very still at his sides, and the back of his neck was cold. He thought about Bruce's voice in the first session. "You prepare the response in advance." He thought about walking into it knowing you've done everything. He thought about Miriam saying, "I didn't have a choice," and Bruce saying, "You always had a choice." He turned around. "Can it be destroyed without killing me?" Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him, then at Bruce. Bruce stepped forward. "The blood," he said to Dumbledore. "When Voldemort used Harry's blood to restore himself, the old protection, Lily's sacrifice, you told me you believed that created a tether, a reason for Harry's continued life that is anchored in Voldemort's own body." "I believe," Dumbledore said carefully, "that as long as Voldemort lives, the protection that runs in his blood, Lily's protection, anchors Harry to life even in circumstances that should kill him." He paused. "Which means that if Harry were struck by a killing curse while Voldemort still lives, the Horcrux within him might be destroyed, but Harry survives," Bruce said, "because Voldemort is simultaneously his threat and his anchor." "In theory," Dumbledore said, "the magic involved is unprecedented. I would not stake Harry's life on a theory without—" "It's not your life to stake," Harry said from the window. Both of them looked at him. "It's mine," Harry said. He walked back toward them. He wasn't shaking. He was surprised that he wasn't shaking, but he wasn't. He was just completely and precisely himself, standing in the room he was standing in with the information he now had, and making a choice with his eyes fully open. "It's my life and my choice, and I'm choosing to know this. All of it, now." He looked at Dumbledore. "Is there anything else you've been holding back because you thought knowing it would break me?" Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. "No," he said, "that is everything." "Then I know everything," Harry said, "and I'm still standing here. And I'm choosing this, not the prophecies version of it, not your chessboard version of it, my version. Where I go into it prepared and informed and I win." He met Dumbledore's eyes. "Can you accept that? That I'm not your weapon and I'm not your sacrifice. I'm a person who has chosen to fight." The fire popped. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a very long time. His blue eyes moved over Harry's face with an expression that Harry had never seen from him, something stripped of strategy, of management, of the layers of protective calculation. He looked like a man looking at someone he loved. "Yes," Dumbledore said, "I can accept that." A pause. I should have let you make this choice a long time ago. That is my failure, Harry, not a strategic one, a human one." "I know," Harry said. "I'm sorry," Dumbledore said. Harry looked at him. "I know that too." They walked out of Dumbledore's office together, down the gargoyle staircase, back into the ordinary corridor with its stone walls and drafts and distant noise of students between classes. Harry walked for 30 seconds and then stopped. He put his hand on the wall and breathed. "You're allowed to feel that," Bruce said. "I know," Harry said. "I'm just giving it a second before I have to do anything with it." "Take however long you need," Bruce said. 60 seconds, Harry said. "Then I want to tell Ron and Hermione. They'll need to know," Bruce agreed. "And then I want to train," Harry said. "I want to train harder than we've done yet, not because I'm angry, because I understand the stakes now, all the way down, and I want my preparation to match them." Bruce looked at him. 60 seconds, he said. Harry stood with his hand on the cold stone of the Hogwarts wall and breathed, in and out, slow and full, and felt the weight of everything he now knew settle into him the way heavy things settle when you stop fighting their weight and just take it on properly. Stand under it with your legs straight. 50 seconds. 55. "Okay," Harry said. He straightened. "Let's go." They walked. He told Ron and Hermione in the room of requirement at lunchtime. The room configured itself, unprompted, as a small sitting room, 3 chairs, a low fire. Nobody asked for it, but the castle gave it anyway. Hermione cried. She didn't make noise about it. She just sat very still with her hands folded in her lap, and her eyes went very bright and 2 tears came down her face, and she made no attempt to wipe them away, which for Hermione was its own specific kind of devastation. Ron did not cry. He sat for a long time with his elbows on his knees and his hands together and his eyes on the floor, and then he looked up and said, "You're not dying." "No," Harry said. "I'm serious," Ron said. "I know what the prophecy says, I know what Dumbledore thinks, I know what the theory is, but you're not dying. That's the outcome of this. We make sure of that." He looked at Harry with the specific directness of someone who had made a decision rather than expressed an opinion. "Whatever we need to do, that's the outcome." "That's what I said to Dumbledore," Harry said. "Good," Ron said. "So we agree? Excellent. Now are we eating?" "Because I missed breakfast for the Thursday group session, and I've had half a piece of toast, and my thinking is severely impaired." Hermione laughed through the last of her tears in a way that was half genuine and half relieved to have somewhere to put the emotion. Harry laughed too. The fire burned. Outside the room, the castle moved around them with its usual Friday energy. Students in corridors, lessons ending and beginning, the great hall beginning to fill for lunch. And inside it the 3 of them sat together in the particular way they'd been sitting together since first year, which was the way that meant this was the center of gravity. This was the thing that held. Bruce found Harry in the astronomy tower at 11 that night. Harry had been expecting him, or had hoped for him. The distinction mattered less than it used to. 14 hours, Bruce said. Since this morning, Harry confirmed. "How are you doing?" "Honestly," Harry looked at the stars. "I feel like the ground changed under my feet and I've been walking for 14 hours to figure out if it's still solid." He paused. "It is, I think it is, but it's a different ground than it was yesterday." "Yes," Bruce said. "I keep thinking about the piece of his soul," Harry said. "That it's been there my whole life, that it's why I can speak Parseltongue, why I can feel what he feels, why the connection exists." He turned to look at Bruce. "It doesn't feel like him in me. It's never felt like something foreign, which is either reassuring or more frightening. I can't decide." "It's information," Bruce said. "The scar gave you access to him. He thought it was purely his advantage. It never was." "The door argument," Harry said. "Control it rather than close it," Bruce said. "Which is what we've been building toward anyway." Harry nodded. "Then the rift," he said. "Yes. How long now, honestly?" Bruce was quiet for a moment. The specific quality of his quiet was different from usual, less analytical, more weighted. "The geomagnetic reading this morning," he said. 12 days, possibly less." Harry looked at the sky. 12 days. "Then we don't waste them," Harry said. "No," Bruce said. "I want everything," Harry said. "Everything left that you can teach me. Every scenario, every contingency, everything you know about fighting someone stronger than you when the rules don't apply. All of it." He looked at Bruce. "Don't hold anything back because you think I'm not ready. I'm ready." Bruce looked at him for a long moment. "I know you are," he said. They sat on the bench. The night was very clear, one of those October nights that felt like the atmosphere had been cleaned, every star precise and specific. "Can I ask you something?" Harry said. "Yes. When you went back to Gotham, in your life there, Before this, he paused, looking for the right angle. Was there anyone you trained, someone you brought in the way you've brought me in? Bruce was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that was deciding not whether to answer but how. Yes, he said, a boy, 12-13 when I found him, impossibly skilled for his age, angry in a way that was going to get him killed if it didn't find a direction. He looked at the sky. I gave it a direction. What's his name? Dick, Bruce said, and something moved in his expression that was deep and private and whole. He's extraordinary. He figured out things about himself that I'm still working out about myself. A pause. He'd have liked you. You miss him? Harry said. Every day, Bruce said. The simplicity of it was complete. Harry sat with this. With the image of Bruce Wayne, this self-contained, impenetrable, endlessly prepared person, missing someone with the uncomplicated completeness of someone who had opened themselves enough to have something worth missing. You opened the door for me, Harry said quietly. You took the ceiling down, and I think, he stopped, tried again. I think you did it because you actually care what happens to me, not as a variable, not as a mission, actually care. The silence that followed was very long. Yes, Bruce said. The word was small and exact, and it cost something, Harry could tell, in the way small, exact, true things always cost something from someone who had learned to keep them close. Then whatever 12 days we have left, Harry said, that's what they're for, not just the training, all of it. He looked at Bruce. You said when you go back I'll have everything. I want that to include this talking, because this is part of what you've given me, not just the fighting, the way of seeing, the way of being in a room. The way of making a choice with your eyes open. He paused. I want to keep that when you're gone. You'll keep it, Bruce said. It's yours. It was always in you, I didn't put it there. I just showed you where it was. Harry looked at him. That's what good teachers do, isn't it? The best ones, Bruce said. Yes, they sat in the cold and the clarity for a long time. Below them Hogwarts breathed. 300 people sleeping and worrying and being young in a school that sat in the path of a war they hadn't chosen. In the Slytherin common room, Draco Malfoy stared at a letter from his father that he hadn't opened yet. In the library, Hermione had fallen asleep over a book on soul magic with her cheek on her notes, and a house elf had quietly put a blanket over her shoulders. In the dormitory, Ron Weasley slept without the restlessness that had marked his nights since September, something having resolved in him during the afternoon's conversation that would take him weeks to fully name. In the astronomy tower, Harry Potter sat next to the person who had taught him more about himself in 3 weeks than anyone had managed in 14 years, and watched the stars, and thought about 12 days, and thought about all the ways they would not be wasted. Outside, past the edge of the Forbidden Forest, the sky showed that slight discoloration at the horizon, deeper violet now, unmistakable, bleeding upward into the dark. The rift was no longer dreaming. Chapter 6, The Successor. The intelligence reached Voldemort on a Monday. They didn't know this immediately. They knew it the way you know a storm has shifted direction, not by seeing it, but by feeling the pressure change. Monday evening, the Dawlish Channel went quiet, not gradually, not with the slow fade of someone being cautious, just off, like a switch. Bruce was at the window of the room of requirement when Harry arrived for the morning session on Tuesday, watching the grounds with that specific quality of stillness that meant he had already been thinking for a long time about something that required serious thought. He knows, Harry said. Since last night, Bruce said. Dawlish stopped moving on his own recognizance at approximately 9 p.m. Someone recalled him. The intelligence we fed him, the false supply line, the fictional order safe house in Aberdeen has been received and processed. Voldemort knows we burned the channel, which means he knows we identified it, which means he knows you're here, Harry said. He knew I was here before this, Bruce said. Miriam would have reported an encounter with an unknown non-magical combatant in her initial debriefing. He's known about me since the 4th floor infiltration. He turned from the window. What this tells him is that we're operational. That this isn't an accidental addition to the castle's defenses. That there's a coordinated intelligence effort happening, and it's working faster than he accounted for. Harry sat down on the mat, and that changes his timeline. Significantly, Bruce said, he was planning something for the ministry. The Department of Mysteries, the prophecy, that's still the goal because we've denied him the memory vessel and the Aberdeen intelligence was false, so his next supply operation has been redirected into nowhere. He needs the prophecy. He needs to know the full text. He looked at Harry, and he needs to remove the variable he didn't anticipate. You, Harry said. Me, yes, Bruce said. But also you, the version of you that exists now versus the version that existed when he built his plans around you. He sat down across from Harry. He is going to move against Hogwarts. Not a full assault, he doesn't have the army for that yet, and the castle's protections are still substantial. Something faster, something targeted. He held Harry's gaze. He's going to come himself. The room was very quiet. "How soon?" Harry said. 10 days was my estimate for the rift, Bruce said. "Voldemort's timeline is probably inside that. I'd guess 5 days, maybe less." Harry sat with this. He did the thing he'd been practicing, first the board, then the feeling. The board showed a convergence. Voldemort moving earlier than expected, rift opening within 10 days, 12 days of preparation that had now compressed to 5. The feeling, when he let himself feel it, was not fear. It was something close to readiness that had an edge of grief in it, because readiness meant it was nearly time for everything they'd built to be used, and everything they'd built to be used meant the 12 days were nearly over. He let the feeling happen. He didn't fight it. Then he moved it aside. "All right," he said. "Tell me everything you know about how he'll come in." They spent Tuesday and Wednesday on scenario planning. Every entry point in the castle, every magical defense and its failure state, every combination of forces Voldemort could plausibly bring in a targeted strike. Bruce ran them through the scenarios, with Hermione cross-checking his magical assumptions in real time, Ron mapping the spatial logic of each approach against his mental chessboard, Harry absorbing and questioning, and pushing back where the scenario didn't account for something he knew about Voldemort that Bruce was still learning. Because Harry did know things about Voldemort that Bruce was still learning. That was the truth of it. Bruce had studied him from the outside, from documentation and Miriam's intelligence and Harry's accounts. Harry had felt him, had been in the same room with him, had looked into those red eyes, had heard the voice that contained something beyond cruelty, a specific cold intelligence that never stopped calculating. "He underestimates feeling," Harry said on Wednesday afternoon. "He always has. It's not just that he can't feel, he thinks feeling is a handicap. He plans around it as a weakness to exploit, not as a force to account for." He looked at Bruce. "Which means when I act from it, genuinely, directly from caring about someone, he won't see it coming. He can't model it. The prophecies' power he knows not," Bruce said. "I used to think that was something mystical," Harry said. "Now I think it's tactical. It's actually tactical. His own limitation built into his approach." Bruce looked at him for a moment. "That's a significant insight," he said. "I've had a good teacher," Harry said. Bruce's expression did the thing. He looked away first. Thursday arrived with the specific quality of a day that means something before you've opened your eyes. Harry felt it when he woke. Not the scar, nothing from that direction, which was itself information, not a dream. Just the particular atmospheric weight of a day with edges to it, a day that has decided something about itself before the people in it have. He dressed, went downstairs, found Bruce already at breakfast with Lupin and Tonks, the three of them talking quietly over the table in a way that stopped when Harry approached, but stopped without concealment, the stopping of people finishing a thought rather than hiding one. "Today," Harry said. "Maybe tonight," Bruce said. "Maybe tomorrow." The geomagnetic reading shifted this morning. The rift is accelerating. Harry sat down. How long? 4 days maximum, possibly less. So the rift would open before Voldemort moved, or on the same night or the night after. The three scenarios sorted themselves in Harry's head with the cool clarity that had become second nature over the last weeks. He looked at each of them. He didn't love any of them. "If the rift opens before Voldemort moves," Harry said, "and you go through it, we've talked about this," Bruce said. "I want to say it out loud anyway," Harry said. "If the rift opens and you go through it before Voldemort comes, we use what we've built. We don't wait. We take everything you've given us and we go at him first if we can." "You don't go at him first," Bruce said. "You make him come to you on ground you've chosen and you meet him prepared." He held Harry's gaze. "There is a difference between walking toward the fight and rushing the fight. Don't rush it." "I know," Harry said. "Say it back to me." "I wait for ground I've chosen," Harry said. "I make him come to me." "And," Bruce said, "and I remember that his certainty about what I am is wrong," Harry said. "His model of me is built on everything I was, not everything I am." "Correct," Bruce said. He looked at Harry for a moment with the full weight of the look, not reduced or managed. "Whatever happens in the next 4 days, Harry, you're ready." "I know," Harry said. He meant it. "It happened on Friday night, not the rift, not first. First, at 11 p.m., every window on the north face of the castle went dark simultaneously, not naturally, not from weather, deliberately. An external magical suppression cast across a wide area that was specifically targeted at Hogwarts' natural lighting systems. Harry felt it before he saw it, because he was already awake, already sitting at the window of his dormitory, watching the north grounds with the low-grade awareness that had become constant over the last week. When the windows went dark, he was dressed and had his wand in 40 seconds and the communication disc in his hand, and was pressing it 3 times before he'd fully processed the decision to do so. The disc pulsed back immediately. Bruce was already moving. Harry went. The castle's response to the suppression was immediate and imperfect. The alarm charms Dumbledore had placed activated, which meant the low, resonant pulse that Harry had been told to listen for started running through the stone walls like a heartbeat. Lights in the corridors stayed on through a separate system. Portraits started talking rapidly to each other in the relay network they used for emergency communication. Met Bruce on the third-floor landing. Bruce was in full armor, cowl on, white lenses giving nothing away in the torchlit corridor. He had something in each hand, tools, devices, shaped dark objects that Harry recognized as the twins' modified products. East Rampart, Bruce said. 3 entry points breached simultaneously. The suppression is cover for movement, not the attack itself. He was already moving. He's not using Death Eaters as the advance. He came himself. Harry's scar spiked. Not painfully, differently the way a tuning fork resonates when the matching frequency sounds near it. A recognition, a pull, the door in his mind swinging on its hinge. He didn't close it. He stood behind it and looked through and let himself feel the shape of what was on the other side. Cold intelligence, absolute certainty, the specific flavor of Voldemort's consciousness, not evil in the cartoon sense but empty in a way that had learned to weaponize itself, and underneath it, threading through the calculation, rage, old, structured, controlled rage at something that kept refusing to be resolved. Harry specifically, the unresolvable variable. Good, Harry thought, directly at the connection. Come find me. He ran. The Great Hall was where it converged. Not by Voldemort's choice, by Harry's, because Harry had spent 3 weeks learning to create situations that worked in his favor, and the Great Hall had specific properties he'd mapped with Bruce. 4 entrances, high ceiling, the structural magic in the walls that responded to concentrated spellwork, and the exit routes that meant anyone in the center of it was equidistant from multiple escape options. He didn't come alone. Ron and Hermione were 30 seconds behind him, and they'd brought Neville and Ginny and Luna, and Lupin and Tonks were coming down from the upper floors, because the DA's new protocol, small groups, always briefed, always knowing the night signal, had worked exactly as designed. The Room of Requirement had quietly deployed 12 people to 3 different positions in the castle interior, none of them where they could be targeted simultaneously. Dumbledore was there too. He was already in the hall when Harry arrived, standing in its center with his wand drawn, and he looked at Harry with an expression that was absolutely clear of everything except what mattered. He's coming in through the east, Harry said. I know, Dumbledore said. Harry, I know everything, Harry said. We don't need to brief me. I know what I am and I know what needs doing. Just fight alongside me. Don't fight instead of me. Dumbledore looked at him for a half-second. Alongside you, he said. Yes. The east wall door blew open. Not magically, physically, thrown off its hinges with the kind of force that was on the far end of even powerful magic. The stone around the doorframe cracked outward, and cold air poured in from the corridor, and with it came light, not torchlight. Something colder, something that had no natural source, a blue-white luminescence that preceded Voldemort the way a shadow preceded a person in strong light, except inverted. He walked in. Harry had seen him twice before, once in a dream and once in the graveyard. Both times he had been shaking, not from cowardice, just from the specific physical response to the proximity of something that vast and that wrong. The rebounded magic that had destroyed Voldemort's body and the Horcruxes that had rebuilt it had produced something that barely passed for human at the surface and had stopped pretending underneath. He was tall. He moved like something that had given up on performing normality. His red eyes moved immediately to Harry with the specific quality of a calculation resolving. Harry Potter, Voldemort said. His voice was what it always was, cold velvet wrapped around a blade. You've been busy. I have, Harry said. Something moved in Voldemort's expression. The variable had spoken without flinching. The model was already wrong. The Muggle, Voldemort said, and his eyes moved to the side of the hall, to Bruce, who had come in from the north entrance and was standing 20 feet from Harry with the absolute specific stillness of someone who had assessed this situation completely and was ready to move in any direction. Interesting. I've been curious about you. I know, Bruce said. Voldemort looked at him the way he looked at most things, calculating the use and the disposal simultaneously. You have no magic, Voldemort said. You are, in this world, the most ordinary kind of human being possible, and yet you are here. And yet, Bruce said. Why? Voldemort said. Genuine curiosity. What does a Muggle believe he can offer in? I taught Harry Potter everything he knows about fighting someone exactly like you, Bruce said. I'll let you evaluate the implications of that yourself. Voldemort was still for a fraction of a second. Then he raised his wand at Bruce. Harry was already moving. Not at Bruce's position. That was the obvious move, the reactive move, the move Voldemort had modeled. Harry moved sideways and fired, not expelliarmus, not stupefy, a combination he and Bruce had spent 3 days developing in the last week. Hermione's modified deflection cast layered with a disorientation charm underneath it. The two spells timed with a half-second gap that meant the deflection hit first and changed the air density around the target, and the disorientation cast traveled through the change-density air at a different velocity than Voldemort would calculate for. Voldemort's wand moved. The deflection took the redirected spell sideways. The disorientation caught him. Not fully, nothing caught Voldemort fully, but he moved, actually moved, physically adjusted, his head turning fractionally in a way that meant something had landed. A fraction of a second where the calculation running behind those red eyes had to account for something it hadn't modeled. Now, Harry said, the hall came alive. Dumbledore from the left, massive, sweeping defensive architecture of spellwork that restructured the physical space of the hall, pulling cover up from the floor, redirecting exit vectors. Lupin and Tonks from the upper gallery, coordinated fire that split around Voldemort's position and forced him to defend on 2 axes. Hermione from behind a column, contributing the ward disruption sequences she'd been refining for 2 weeks that went after the passive defensive magic Voldemort always carried around himself, chipping at it methodically rather than trying to break it in one strike. Ron was at the east door with Neville, holding it, keeping Death Eaters out of the hall because there were Death Eaters, 2 of them, who had come through the breached exterior and were trying to enter and met instead a Weasley who had been trained by Bruce Wayne, and a Longbottom who had found out what he was made of, and a Lovegood who appeared from a side corridor, and did something with her wand that made both Death Eaters simultaneously look at the wrong corner of the room with absolute conviction. "There's nothing there," one of them said, confused. "I know," Luna said, and stunned them both, and Bruce. Bruce had moved the moment Voldemort's wand came up, and he'd moved in the direction that made no tactical sense unless you understood his particular methodology, toward Voldemort, not away, closing distance rather than creating it, because at distance Voldemort was completely dominant, and at close range the calculus changed, and Bruce had spent 30 years making close range his. He wasn't trying to fight Voldemort physically. He was trying to disrupt him. To be in Voldemort's space, requiring his attention, taking up processing power in that cold, brilliant mind, because Voldemort's model of this room did not include a close-range physical threat from a human with no magic, and the model breaking down mid-battle was itself a weapon. Voldemort cast. The spell hit the floor where Bruce had been. Bruce was elsewhere, already moving, a dark powder device from his belt deployed at Voldemort's feet that wasn't Peruvian darkness. It was the twins' new product, the directional adaptation, and a corridor of darkness bloomed between Voldemort and the hall's center, and Dumbledore walked straight into it from the other side because Dumbledore could fight in absolute darkness the way most people couldn't read in dim light. The sounds coming from inside the darkness corridor were extraordinary. Harry ran the perimeter. He'd learned this from Bruce, not the obvious approach, the one the opponent expected, but the angle they hadn't covered, the vector they'd dismissed. Voldemort was occupied with Dumbledore. The darkness was a contained disruption. His Death Eaters were handled. The hall was configured in Harry's favor. He stopped running at the east pillar, put his back against it, and breathed. He thought about everything, about Miriam and her son, about Neville finding out what he was made of, about Ron reading the board before anyone else in the room, about Hermione chipping methodically at something bigger than her because methodical was how you broke things bigger than you. About Ginny, somewhere to his right, moving with a speed and precision that would have stunned anyone who'd only known her as Ron's little sister. About Bruce standing in the darkness doing something impossible with no magic and making it work. About his mother. About what love looked like when it moved at full strength, not careful, not strategic, not managed, just completely itself. A force that had no interest in being calculated around. Power he knows not. The darkness dissipated. Voldemort stood in the cleared center of the hall, and he was breathing harder than Harry had ever seen him breathe, and his eyes were moving, rapidly, calculating, trying to rebuild the model that had been wrong from the first moment. Dumbledore was at the edge of the hall, on one knee, winded but functional. Bruce was against the wall 20 feet away, bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow, standing completely straight. Voldemort looked at Harry. Harry stepped away from the pillar. They were 40 feet apart. The hall was very still. Everyone had stopped, not from paralysis, but from the specific recognition that this was the moment, and the moment required space. "You're different," Voldemort said. "Yes," Harry said. "He did this." Voldemort's eyes moved to Bruce, the Muggle. "He showed me where it already was," Harry said. Voldemort looked at him with those red eyes doing their relentless calculation, and Harry looked back and did something he had never done before in Voldemort's presence. He opened the door. Not passively, actively. He reached through the scar connection with the full force of everything he was, not the fear and the anger and the reactive urgency, but the love. The specific, complete, total love he had for every person in this hall, for Sirius writing letters from hiding, for Lupin looking tired and fighting anyway, for the Weasley family eating dinner together with all their noise, for Hermione asleep over a book with a house elf's blanket on her shoulders, for a boy he'd met on a train who had become the center of his world. He sent it directly through the connection. Not as an attack, just as what it was. Voldemort recoiled. Not magically, physically, visibly, a full step backward, and an expression moved across his face that Harry had never seen there. Something that looked like pain, and under it something that looked like the memory of want, and under that something so old and so buried that it had no name left, just the shape of the absence of what had been there before Tom Riddle had decided that love was a weakness and magic was the answer. Harry raised his wand. Expelliarmus. Simple. Clean. His spell and no one else's. The Elder Wand left Voldemort's hand. It arced across the Great Hall in a clean silver line, and Harry caught it left-handed, his own wand still in his right, and stood there with both wands in both hands and looked at Voldemort. Voldemort was still standing, wandless, recalibrating, still dangerous, and Harry knew that a wandless Voldemort was not a defeated Voldemort, knew that the war didn't end here, not tonight, not with one disarming charm in a school hall. But this was not what Voldemort had prepared for. This specific moment, wandless, facing a 15-year-old who had walked toward him without fear and hit him through a soul connection with something he had no vocabulary for and taken his wand with the simplest spell in every student's repertoire, was not in any version of the model. "It's over," Harry said, not triumphantly, factually. "Not the war, not yet, but this, tonight, this is done." Voldemort looked at him. Those red eyes moved over Harry with an expression that was moving through several stages: fury, calculation, something that might have been, in another life, respect. "The prophecy," Voldemort said. "I know the prophecy," Harry said. "I know all of it. And I choose it not because I have to, because I'm the one standing here." A sound from the corridor, more Death Eaters moving, the castle wards responding, Dumbledore's protective magic contracting back toward the hall with the specific quality of a professional deciding to end something rather than extend it. Voldemort looked at the door, at Dumbledore, at Bruce, who was watching from the wall with that expression of complete readiness, at Harry, one final long look. Then he moved, the specific impossibility of apparition inside Hogwarts, except Voldemort operated on different terms than the castle had been designed for, and was gone. The hall breathed. Afterward was chaos in the organized way that aftermaths always were, everyone accounted for, injuries assessed, Madame Pomfrey appearing from somewhere with the focused severity of a professional interrupted, the castle's protective systems slowly recalibrating to the damage done to the east wall. Harry stood in the center of it and let it happen around him. He was unhurt. He was breathing. He had both wands in his hands, and Voldemort's wand was humming against his palm with a faint recognition that was uncomfortable and completely expected. Ron appeared at his shoulder. He looked at Harry's hands. He looked at Harry's face. "You good?" he said. "Yeah," Harry said. "That thing you did," Ron said. Through the connection, the thing that made him step back." "I know," Harry said. "What was that?" Harry thought about how to explain it. "Everything," he said. "Everything I have, everyone I love, I just showed it to him completely." Ron was quiet for a moment, and it hurt him. "He's never had it," Harry said. "Not once, not a version of it. And he chose not to have it, so it should be simple, it should just be nothing to him. But it's not." He looked at the space where Voldemort had stood. "It's the thing he can't ever have. And knowing it exists and can't be taken or destroyed, that's its own kind of pain, for someone like him." Ron looked at him for a long time. "Bruce told you that," he said. "Bruce told me the power was real," Harry said. "The rest I worked out." "That's the same thing," Ron said. Across the hall, Bruce was talking to Dumbledore. They were standing side by side, and the conversation had the quality of two people reviewing something they had collectively survived rather than celebrating it. Dumbledore's hand was on Bruce's arm briefly, in the way of someone checking an injury and then leaving it, and Bruce accepted it in the way of someone who had long since made peace with the fact that caring for others sometimes involved being cared for in return, however briefly and however uncomfortably. Harry watched them. Hermione arrived, took Harry's arm and didn't say anything for a moment, just held on. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything. The rift opened at 2 in the morning. It opened over the north grounds, exactly where Bruce had predicted, the same geomagnetic point as the original entry, the sky splitting in that vertical violet-white tier that Harry recognized from the Quidditch pitch weeks ago, except this time he was standing on the ground watching it from below. They all came: Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, Luna, Lupin, Tonks, Dumbledore, the twins. Even Draco Malfoy was somewhere near the back, and Harry didn't comment on it, and neither did anyone else. Bruce stood at the edge of the light with his equipment gathered, the cowl off, his face visible. He looked at Dumbledore first. "The Horcruxes," Bruce said. "The locket, it was in Grimmauld Place. The cup is in a Gringotts vault, Bellatrix Lestrange's, which means a break-in eventually. The diadem is in the castle, room of requirement, the hiding room configuration, middle shelf of a cabinet with a damaged bust on top of it." Dumbledore stared at him. How? Miriam's intelligence. "Historical Death Eater movement records. And you," Bruce said, "the things you said and the things you didn't say told me enough to fill the gaps." He paused. "The snake. When you're ready for the snake, you'll need Harry." "I know," Dumbledore said quietly. "And Harry will be ready," Bruce said. "More ready than you've planned for." He looked at Lupin. "You're a better teacher than you think you are," he said. "Stop apologizing for what you are. It's wasted energy." Lupin looked at him with something that was full and too complex to name. He looked at Tonks. "You already know what you're worth," he said. "Stop waiting for the world to catch up." Tonks made a sound that might have been a laugh, except her nose had gone distinctly wrong-shaped, and her eyes were very bright. "Right," she said. "Yeah." He looked at the twins. Fred and George Weasley, who had been standing with their arms folded and their usual performance of unconcernedness deployed like armor, both of them looking at Bruce with expressions that were absolutely nothing like unconcerned. "The shop," Bruce said. "Open it. Everything you've been sitting on, the products, the ideas, the things you're not sure anyone will want. Open it. It matters more than you know." He looked at both of them equally. "I mean that literally and specifically. What you make will matter." "Remember that?" Fred swallowed visibly. George looked at his shoes. Right then, Fred managed. "Yeah," George said. He looked at Ron. "You're going to be the person who stands between Harry and the thing that would use Harry's love against him," Bruce said. "You already know how to read the board. You're going to read it faster than any enemy can move on it." He held Ron's gaze. "Trust the intelligence you have, every time." Ron looked back at him steadily. "Every time," he repeated, like a commitment. He looked at Hermione. She was already crying, which she was clearly furious about, and Bruce looked at her with an expression that was as close to gentle as his face got. "Every ceiling you think is real," he said. "Isn't." He paused. "Keep asking the question underneath the question. You're always right that there's one." "I know," she said, not entirely steadily. "And be kind to yourself," he said, "at the same rate you are to everyone else." She made a sound, covered her mouth with her hand, nodded. Bruce turned to Harry. The rift was expanding behind him. The light was brighter now, the violet-white edges widening, and the sound was returning, that low, resonant objection of the universe, like a frequency at the edge of hearing. They stood facing each other. Harry had prepared what he wanted to say. He'd spent the hours after the battle composing it, the right words, the right order, the appropriate weight for what this was. He'd had something good. Something complete. He'd forgotten all of it the moment Bruce turned to face him. What came out instead was, "I'm going to win." Bruce looked at him. "Not tonight," Harry said. "It wasn't finished tonight, I know that. He's still there and there are still Horcruxes and the war is still," he stopped. "But I'm going to win it, not because of the prophecy, not because Dumbledore's been planning it, because I am completely capable of it and I have decided to, and I will not stop deciding until it's done." The rift pulled at Bruce, not dramatically, just a low, persistent gravity, the dimensional equivalent of a tide coming in. "I know," Bruce said. "You showed me how," Harry said. "Not how to fight, how to be. In a room, in a fight, with a decision in front of me. How to be the person who comes down." He felt his throat do the thing and didn't fight it this time. "How to be the person who comes down and doesn't regret it." Bruce looked at him. The white lenses were off, just his face, just his actual eyes, which were very dark and very present. "You were already that person," Bruce said. "I just showed you where the door was." "Then thank you," Harry said. "For finding the door." Bruce held his gaze for a long moment. Then he did something that Harry had not seen from him in 5 weeks, not the corner of the mouth almost smile, not the fractional expression shift, but a full actual thing, brief and real and completely unguarded. He smiled. "Don't stop," he said. "Whatever happens, whatever he does, whatever they ask you to be, don't stop being the person who comes down." Harry held out his hand. Bruce took it, gripped it. Not a formal handshake, the grip of two people who had built something together and were acknowledging it honestly. "Go home," Harry said. "Dick's waiting." Bruce breathed. Something in his expression that was old and real and had been traveling a long distance finally arrived somewhere. "Yeah," he said. "He is." He walked into the light. The rift closed behind him between one breath and the next, no dramatic fade, no lingering residue, just the clean absolute close of something completed. The violet light vanished. The sky went back to being the Scottish sky, dark and clean and full of stars. The grounds were very quiet. Harry stood looking at the place where Bruce had stood. The grass was slightly scorched, a dark outline of where the rift had touched the earth, and the air had that charged quality that lightning left behind. Then Ron's hand came down on his shoulder, and Hermione took his arm again, and the sounds of the people behind him came forward, Lupin and Tonks and the twins and Neville and Luna and Ginny and all the rest of them, present and alive and ready and different from what they'd been 5 weeks ago. Harry breathed. He turned around to face all of them, his people, his team, the people he had chosen and who had chosen him, and he looked at them clearly, everyone, and he felt the full weight of everything they were and everything they had ahead of them and carried it the way he'd learned to carry it, with his legs straight and his eyes open. "All right," he said, "the war's not over." "No," Dumbledore said from behind the group, his voice quiet and genuine and stripped of management. "It is not. So we have work to do," Harry said. He looked at Hermione. "Bellatrix's vault." "Absolutely not," she said immediately, then caught herself. "I mean, obviously we're doing it. There will need to be substantial planning and possibly a diversionary." "Obviously," Harry said. "Right," Hermione said and pulled out a notebook. Ron laughed. Ginny covered her smile badly. Luna appeared to be looking at something in the sky that nobody else could see, which was completely ordinary and somehow deeply comforting. Neville looked at Harry. "What do you need?" he said. "Not what can I do, what do you need?" The question of someone who had stopped asking whether they were capable and started asking where to aim it. Harry thought about that, thought about what Bruce would answer. "Your best," Harry said. "Every day, that's all." Neville nodded once. "That I can do," he said, and he meant it completely. They walked back toward the castle, all of them together, through the cold October dark under the full spread of stars. The east wall damage was visible from the grounds, the cracked stone pale and fresh against the old dark of the castle face, and it looked less like damage now and more like a mark, like the place something had happened that would matter. Harry looked up at the castle as they walked toward it. He thought about 5 weeks, about a man who had fallen out of the sky with no magic and no standing and no invitation, and had walked into this building and started dismantling every false ceiling with the patient precision of someone who believed, without needing to be told, that the people inside deserved better than what they'd been given. He thought about what it meant to choose your destiny rather than receive it. He thought about the door. He went through it. 3 months later, in a Gotham City penthouse above the noise of the city, Bruce Wayne sat at his desk in the pre-dawn dark and wrote in the journal he kept, not the case files, not the tactical logs, but the other journal, the one Alfred had once given him and that he'd filled and replaced 6 times since. He wrote for a long time. At the end, he read over what he'd written. Then he looked out the window at Gotham, his city, his responsibility, his chosen ground, and felt the particular weight of it and the particular love of it simultaneously. He thought about a 15-year-old on a Quidditch pitch who had come down while everyone else stayed up. He thought about don't stop being the person who comes down. He wrote one final line, "He'll be all right." He closed the journal. He went to work.